make sure everything's working. This is on Teams, obviously, so I do have the cameras going. There's a camera up here, the owl, and the microphone. I also have a camera in the back. That's the iPad that I have set up. That's just the camera. That's just for production effects. This is my 5th training, and each training I've been refining my production techniques here on meetings. So don't mind me. Hopefully it doesn't distract anything. So start by introducing myself. For those that don't know me, my name is Dylan Rader. I am fire planner for formerly Nevada BLM, now Great Basin Wildland Fire Service. We're currently kind of working through our new TO. Hopefully we're at a point where we're thinking we're going to be able to stick with our legacy areas of responsibilities, at least through fire season. That hasn't been approved by the chief yet, but that's the proposal we're putting forward. And the reason I tell you that is because that's basically how we've been delineated throughout the last 5 years anyway, under the GAE concept that we've been doing. Mark Williams over in Utah, he'll be one of the fire planners. Jeremy Cisneros, something like that, will be another one of the fire planners. Cromwell is a recent ad. He was the former Boise FMO. He's also in the fire planner group now, so we're kind of divvying up those duties. But I wanted to kind of kick off the WFDSS training with that and letting you guys know that as of now, anyway, we're hoping to keep our same areas of responsibility. If that changes, I'm sure that'll be passed down through the chain. Assume that it will, but I'm sure that it would in some way or another be passed down through the chain. But we're going to go ahead and go forward as we plan, just like normal. And I do have a sign-in sheet, so if you wouldn't mind, if you've already signed in, great. If you haven't signed in, please take the time to sign in. And again, I'm recording this. The intent of recording is to provide a recorded video of the training. I have gotten feedback that people come in midsummer, they need WFDSS training, they need a crash course in WFDSS. If they've got a free day, they work themselves through this training, they can learn WFDSS in the day. So I've had people come up and tell me that they've done that with my past training. So by all means, if you've got any other feedback, let me know. The other way this is set up, and I appreciate Brad. Brad came in here and set up all the hardware and everything to make sure everybody could connect to the internet. It is one of the trainings where I'm hoping you guys work along with me. It's going to be a long day if you're just going to sit here and listen to me, but if you're on your computer, by all means, if you need to do other work, do other work. If you need to step out, do other meetings, step out, do other meetings. The reason I do it on Teams is if you want to go back to your cubicle, you can go back to your cubicle. You can pull this up on Teams. You can do whatever else you do. However, whatever needs to happen to make the workday go by.
Hey, everyone, remember, like, just a simple application when you're.
And I was going to pass it over to you and Donovan and anybody else that wanted to take off a few words.
Welcome, everybody. It's good to see all the old friends from Battle Mountain, all our current friends from Winnemucca. As you look around the room, you're going to see a ton of trip hazards, so mind your footing as you walk around. Sorry, I don't have gap tape. Ops tossed. Restrooms are right outside the door here and to the right. Emergency exit is going to be that door. If there is an emergency, hurricane, earthquake, anything like that, we're going to go out that door. We're going to go all the way to the end of the hallway to the employee parking lot, and the muster area is the parking lot for my ride to work service that's across the parking lot. And then finally, the network. I put out Cat5 cables. I did a spot check. It looks like all the ports in here should be hot. If you can't get the port to work, the other option is to try production wireless. It's been spotty in here. And if production wireless isn't working, we should all have government cell phones. You're gonna have to use your hotspot because I don't have my lines. Donovan?
So I appreciate you coming over here and continuing to do this in person. I think it's important for most people to get it in person. Some people do really well on the online, and that's not me. So thank you for being here. Already done one this year. Kind of took a first ride through it. I wasn't here for it this time. But, the intent is that all of us have a basic level of knock at least a beginning with this up until we can bring in and get a decision to a better spot on a subsequent version of with this. But things move so fast out here, we've got to be able to and be comfortable with getting those initial decisions out. And at the end of the day, if we get there, for people that have never been around it before, that's a win. And then there's certainly a lot of people in the room that have been doing it simultaneously with other jobs, other assignments, on assignment, being a duty officer and one. Be able to bring reinforcements as soon as we can to dedicate some time to really punch out a good dependable product. So thanks for being here.
Mountain. These words you want to kick us off with?
Well, I'd just say appreciate you hosting it. Jack, you always do a good job with this. It's always nice hearing things again, and appreciate your attention to detail and with this. Good course to sit through.
All right, great, thank you.
So
So,
we're striving for and with this decisions this year, we'll duplicate last year of what, 6.4 burned acres.
yeah. Maybe a little more. Just a little more.
It's not training.
Some of that TJ needs to burn. Let's go ahead and just go around and do introductions, if you guys don't mind. I know most of you all know yourselves, but if you'd introduce yourself and if there's anything specific you'd like to work through today, questions with the specific things, go ahead and bring it up.
Yeah, so Sam Alt, acting field manager for the Mount Lewis field office. I've done some WFDSS training, but don't have a ton of hands-on experience, so just, yeah.
Robert Burdick, fuels manager, Battle Mountain District. Just looking to get into the next gen, kind of poke around in there.
John Holbert, Battle Mountain Unit Chief. Training with work is basically with Battle Mountain, hasn't had one in 8 or 9 years. Last name, so.
Any person that love Battle Mountain? They usually read them, don't play on this end, so super refresher.
Josh Henry from Winnemucca. Some years, maybe more, some years do less, so we go numerous years without touching them, so it's just this one time thing, and then other times we do 2 or 3, 4 in the summer, so. I've had to do one kind of by myself one time. Other than that, I've usually had a fire finder or something.
In Harrison Fire Ecology here in Winnemucca, kind of knocking the rust off, the backup to the firefighter here in case he's having an assignment and someone else can step in and help out.
Anthony Perez, battalion chief, filling as the DO, could potentially help with them here and there, but I'm usually the guy out and positive the work is good. Associated with what is happening, so.
These trainings,
Smith.
HT.
Yeah, just happy to this in-person training, and I got this job 3 years ago, and I've been pretty slow fire seasons. Haven't had to do a WFDSS yet, but I know it's gonna happen. Oh, yeah.
Simon Walker, Unit Chief for Winnemucca here. I'm still for Santa Rosa Ranger District, still have a service first there, so we have the potential to not only just be doing ours, but certainly get one started for the EHD and bring it in Toby for anyone else that wants to come over and play as we start developing the decision and saying, no, we're due, just saying it's been a minute since we've had to do one for Santa Rosa, but we have done it in the past.
Winnemucca, Martin.
Mr. Matthews, Deputy District Manager and Bureau Representative, as we no longer have agency administrator quals. And my level with this being Kyle's right-hand man here over the last 4 years is extensive.
Want to introduce yourself?
Derek Messer. Manager here. It's been there for years. My group. It's his ministry.
You want to introduce yourself or?
Hey, good morning, Jared Spear, down here in Winnemucca. What it's the actual, but yeah, mainly just annual refresher trainings here. Mainly IC3, sometimes DO as well, so.
You have one on Teams. Daltrey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, Daltrey Balmer, I'm the acting field manager in Tonopah.
So, yeah, it's become weird. First off, I wanted to get into the agenda, just make sure we're going to be in doing WFDS basically most of the morning. If you do need to break away or come back, hopefully around 11 o'clock or so is when we're going to be working through the approval stages of getting that decision approved. So those would be the two time frames. We're going to kick it off, and then we're going to do the approval about 11 o'clock or so. And then we're going to break for lunch. After lunch, we're going to come back. I've got 2 hours on here, but really it's only an hour, if that. Covering Spatial Fire Planning Service, the data that whoever wants to go through their data will go through and look at the data, see what's in there, see what maybe needs to be updated, and just have a good general understanding of what you have loaded into Spatial Fire Planning Service going into the season. Then some discussion about ISAP and more the in briefing story map that we've created that everybody knows about, but just how that can help support that ISAP process. So I know you guys are also doing the camera training this afternoon, right? Is anybody conflicted with that? Do I need to schedule around that at all, Donovan? Good, good. Okay, then we'll plan on doing this. We'll wrap up, probably about 2 o'clock in reality. So if you can't make it back for the afternoon, great. If you can't make it back for the afternoon, that's fine too. Just like last year, I'm going to be referencing a lot of links, a lot of information. I would like to give Josh Henry credit. Josh, you were the inspiration behind the link tree here. So I don't know if you remember bringing this up last year, but there's a lot of links that are part of this training. And in the agenda or the calendar invite or however you figured out to get to this training, there's a link to this link tree. And I'm going to be referencing this link tree throughout most of the morning, most of the training. I do want to highlight just a few things because I set this up for the WFDS training, but I'm also finding that there's a lot of utility in the transition as well. I'm just making sure that we have all of our fire planning information out there where people can access it. So all the maps, all the different products that I support, I don't want people to get confused with Nevada Fire Maps link tree. That's the very top link because that goes back to Steve's link tree that has all the maps, right? These maps are the maps that I've been providing support for over the last couple of years, the RMA, POS, PCL, SDI map, the subunit non-overlapping WFDS objective map, and the story maps. All of those products are right here. Any of the WFDS links that we're going to access today, you can access them right through here, whether it's directly to WFDS, to FAMOF, if you need to log into FAMOF first, any of the request forms, any of the support forms, we'll go through those today. This Nevada WFDS training section, these are the links that I'm going to be referencing during the training. So that includes the agenda that we're looking at right now, the WFDS guide that we're going to get into when we actually get into the decision, and all of the different support functions as well. So Daltrey, you're the only one that's online. So there is a sign-in link here.
Can you could you share your
sign
screen?
in. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for reminding me. I'm not sharing my screen. That's why it's good to have one person online. There's always something that I forget. There we go. Thank you, Daltrey. Anyway, yeah, there's a training roster form. So anybody that's online, if you don't get into the sign-in sheet, the only thing I'm using the sign-in sheet for is as a certificate of the training. So if anybody needs a certificate for the training, it's not required on the BLM side. On the Wildland Fire Service side, there's no WFDSS refresher training requirement. On the Forest Service side, I think there is an annual WFDSS refresher training requirement for your agency administrators. That's another thing maybe we need to update. I mean, as we go through this, I'm still going to use the term agency administrator because if we're dealing with the Forest Service, we still have agency administrators from the Forest Service, right? They're still using that title for theirs. If they're coming from the BLM or from any of the interior agencies, they're Bureau representatives. If they're from the Forest Service, they're agency administrators. And as the unit fire chiefs, you guys assume that agency administrator role for the Wildland Fire Service, and that's delegated down to you guys and your deputies, obviously. So anyway, this link tree is set up to kind of support all of the training, and I know we'll be going back and forth, but I wanted to just point that out that this is available. When we are completed with the training, I will be processing the videos and posting those to YouTube. So all of the recorded sessions will be available within this section as well. And then the bottom section of the link tree is all the fire danger information as well. So this kind of consolidates all the work that I've been doing over the last several years for what was Nevada BLM. And as we transition into the Wildland Fire Service, hopefully between us, Idaho, Utah, we can take these products and merge them into one great basin product eventually. But at least for now, this is what's set up for Nevada fire planning. I did want to point that out. And I wanted to point out the agenda as well. So are there any questions on the agenda? Anything that we're going to cover today? Go back to that. And I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth a little bit. So in the agenda, there's a couple things. One is access. Hopefully everybody that is in here today already has access. If you don't have access, now would be the time to go in there and request it. Go in there and request it right now. First break, I can go in there and approve you, and we can have you logged into WFDSS here within the hour. We're in the reality that this is about 90% of my objective is just making sure that people have accounts, people can sign into those accounts, and people are ready for fire season by having the account there. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish with this. So if you don't have that account, these instructions, and I realize this is kind of blurry. I wasn't able to mess with I don't know if it's a projector or not, but I wasn't able to mess with the settings at all to get that any better. If you're online, like if you're signed into the Teams meeting and looking at your computer screen, you can probably see it a lot better than looking at the screen, to be honest with you. So anyway, that is in there. When you request access, you need both EDU and production. There's two WFDSS platforms that you need access to. One is training, that's EDU. The other is production. That's what's abbreviated as WFDSS Prod. So you can do a single request. I've got the information in there. If you put my information into the contact at the bottom of the request, I can filter it out, but I can also filter it out by your agency and who you work for too. So again, if you don't have those accounts set up, go ahead and make those requests now through BAMLA. The instructions are in the agenda. And if you need that agenda, it's attached to the email that I sent out last week.
John does not have. John Sherry does not have. You guys need decision.
To consider with that is once you get access, you have to log in before you can see them. So if anybody hasn't logged into either WFDSS Production or WFDSS EDU, which that should be what we're logging into is EDU, log into WFDSS EDU and then that should pop them up into your screen.
Yeah, we requested access. So,
yeah. Yep. So the other thing too that, and this isn't really important, especially considering now that we're going into dual approvals on the decisions on the Wildland Fire Service. Anybody under the Wildland Fire Service is going to be or could potentially be an approver. you need to update your profile. You can do it at any point. It doesn't have, I mean, you can do it now if you've got the delegation, you feel comfortable with it, or you can do it during the incident. But in order to show up in WFDS as an approver, you have to self-certify in your profile that you're an approver. So, you know, as you would think that in today's world with the technology that it would, you know, go back to IQCS or something. WFDS doesn't cross-reference any training requirement. The only thing that WFDS knows is what you self-certified in your profile. So there's no training requirements. There's nothing else that you have to do to make yourself an approver of WFDS other than update your profile here. So that's the one thing. If experienced folks can't participate in the training through that agenda, if you can go through, make sure that you have your approver access set up, and then update any of your information. And I'll actually log into WFDS here in a bit and walk you through this too, but I want to make sure that's clear as well. And this is again, the link to the link tree, just because that's going to get referenced throughout the day. All right, so let me get PowerPoint going because there's a few slides here I want to cover. Then we'll actually get into WFDS. Okay, so you guys read the expected outcome in the email. Won't go over that. We've gone over all of the links, the link tree. Again, anybody that signs in online and goes through this at a later date, you can put your name into that form, and that can be credit for the training online if you scan that form. It's on this slide right here. I do want to talk about WFDS itself because wouldn't be able to, you know, actually fully explain the context of what WFDS is without some of these slides here. One is WFDS is a decision support platform that is used as a common operating picture for wildland fire activity and occurrence, right? So at the national level, at the NMAC level, at the geographic level, at, you know, the coordinating group level, WFDS is being used more and more often as a situational awareness tool more than anything else, right? We're logging into WFDS now. We're looking at values at risk. We're looking at models that have been completed to see, is that a true risk, or are they over exaggerating the risk just to get resources coming their way type thing. All of this information can be gleaned by analysts looking at a WFDS decision. And it's not always 100% accurate. They usually need to ground truth to some degree, but all this information can be gleaned from a fire analyst looking at WFDS from anywhere they have internet access, right? And we're going to be using WFDS in a lot different capacity, I think, going into this transition with the Wildland Fire Service. That's why I think it's good that the battalion chiefs are in here, because the one thing that from my operational role as a fire planner that I see is through a lot of the authorities and the delegations, the IC is going to be expected to be a participant in the WFDS decision now. And as an IC3, I want to be a participant in that WFDS decision because I want to be able to log into the decision and actually read the decision rationale and not have it interpreted to me by somebody else, right? And by having access to WFDS, that gives you a better role at that seat, at that table, and more involvement in the decision. And that's the kind of the role that I see specifically going into this dual approval process that we have between the legacy bureaus and the Wildland Fire Service, which, you know, we've been doing that for years in one form or another, right? It's just, what does that process look like? Who actually puts the ink on the paper? Is that important or not? In this case, I think it's a little bit more important because you got to remember too that these multi-jurisdictional fires where we used to have 4 agency administrators or 4 approvers, we're going to have 8. We're going to have 12 in some cases now, right? When you start looking at all the different bureaus, all the different unit fire chiefs, all the different people that could be part of that decision approval. So WFDS is a common operating picture where all of this fire information can be displayed and communicated. And a lot of it goes back to the 2009 federal fire policy guidance that we talk about in planning. And what that 2009 change in direction was that basically changed from you can have a fire managed for multiple objectives. Previous to 2009, if you were going full suppression on a fire, you had to go full suppression on 100% of that fire. Under this guidance in 2009, we were able to manage a fire for multiple objectives. So you could have, this portion of the fire or this division of the fire would be full suppression. That division of the fire could be other than full suppression. You could have point and zone protection going on. You could have all of those different management strategies on one single incident based off of this 2009 guidance. The other thing that came out of the 2009 Federal Fire Policy Guidance Update was that bottom paragraph there, where managers will use a decision support process to guide and document wildfire decisions. Previous to this, we had been using what was called WFDSS, Fire Situation Assessment. Wildland Fire Situation Assessment tool was similar to WFDSS, but it was a standalone computer program that was DOS based. I mean, you had to upload your textual land use planning information annually into it. Really clunky. WFDSS came about between 2008, 2009, and really was fully adopted as the authoritative data source for wildland fire decisions after the 2009 fire season. So the principles behind WFDSS and behind that decision support is that the information is available to managers when they need to make the decision. It's not something that we need to run, we need to do this. It's everything's available when you need to make the decision. In some cases, you may need to wait a few hours for certain things, but it's available. Obviously, it does not replace decision-making. It enhances decision-making. It comes from a variety of sources, and it falls back to a quantitative analysis procedure. That's kind of the next step that I hope to progress our fire planning efforts into. We've been fully invested, fully involved in spatial fire planning now for 10 years, basically over a decade. And kind of our next step for BLM Nevada or for the Wildland Fire Service is going into quantified risk assessments. And we can do that through spatial fire planning relatively easily. And it's already being done in FDS basically. Decision support information also has applications across a range of scales and concentrations. So what is WFDSS? It's a web-based system. It provides risk and decision sharing. Everybody can log in. You're looking at the same information. You're looking at the same incident. It's strategic decision documentation. You can use different forms of analysis, including fire behavior modeling. We do have some limitations with our fire behavior modeling in what we're now calling just WFDSS. I may refer to it as next gen WFDSS off and on, but I really just mean WFDSS. But there are some limited fire behavior models that are available in WFDSS right now. And all of this is information for the completion of an operational plan. So my perspective coming into this is as a fire planner and then going in as a plans chief. As a plans chief, as soon as my team gets an order for a fire, I'm going into WFDSS, I'm pulling that WFDSS decision, and I should be able to go into your strategic course of action and basically pull out the incident objectives that I need to put into my IAP for tomorrow's IAP based off of your incident objectives and your strategic course of action. And if we're successful in how we write those decisions, that's how it works. A plans chief can come in, grab that WFDSS decision, maybe have to do a little bit of refining, maybe look at what's out there on the ground, obviously, but in consult with the command and general staff, they can glean the incident objectives out of that WFDSS decision and put them in the IAP for tomorrow's shift. And you should be able to see that in that process as well. So we made the transition to new WFDSS, like I talked about. Next generation WFDSS, we transitioned last year. So it is map-based. It is the reason WFDSS, I'm not fully involved, but I think one of the major reasons why we went to WFDSS next generation was because old WFDSS just became too intensive. Old WFDSS was like the very first internet-based mapping application that I've ever seen in fire support. And this is going back 10 years, really. It was AGOL before AGOL was even a thing. And it became really clunky, and it became really hard to support, and it became really data intensive. And it took a lot of data servers, and it became really expensive to support. So the transition to WFDS Next Gen is really more of a transition to that AGOL mapping based platform that we're all used to. And it really puts the map front and center in the decision, and everything else is kind of a sequential working left to right across different tabs through the decision, but everything is available. It's based off of hosted feature services. So it is a dynamic map, meaning that the data in there is constantly being refreshed by whoever's hosting those data features. And that's what makes the map dynamic. So there's hazards, there's all sorts of information that are available in WFDS. All of that information is continually being updated by whoever hosts that feature service. And as that data is updated, it's automatically loaded into WFDS. So it does interface with the Fire Modeling Services Framework and also FIMS. So for those of you that participated in the February NFDRS workshop that we did in Reno, FIMS is now the authoritative data source for our fire weather and our fire danger information, fire danger indices as well. And all that information is imported into WFDS through FIMS now in support of fire behavior modeling and other aspects. And then the Spatial Fire Planning Service is another big aspect of WFDS as well. Spatial Fire Planning Service allows us to have instant access to our data. Locally, at the local level, you have data editors who can go in there and update your data on the fly whenever you need. This is a major improvement from what we had under old WFDS. Under old WFDS, we had to work through an approval process with the GIS specialist just to get the edits in and get text edits in and that kind of stuff. So having the Spatial Fire Planning Service, all of our land use fire planning information goes into the Spatial Fire Planning Service, and then it is ingested into WFDS from the Spatial Fire Planning Service. So that makes our data relevant and operationally useful. Some of the other major improvements since the rollout last year, I'm going to get my laser pointer going. Collaboration with multiple approvers. So that was a bug last year that there was a known bug. We could only have a single approver. Now we can have multiple approvers in WFDS, which going into our transition, like we're going to talk about, is definitely needed. The instant complexity level, that should be 236. The PMS 236, which is the risk complexity assessment, that's been completely updated in WFDS as well, completely mirrors what is on the NWCG form. Then also you can now access historical decisions and analysis. So all of the old WFDS decisions, anything that was done pre-2025, you can download the PDF and any of the supporting information that went with that decision in the reports tab of WFDS now as well. So unfortunately, you can't access it through the map, but you can access through the reports tab, and that's really gets you what you need to, if you have a decision that was done in 2015, the decision that you do in 2026 isn't going to be that much different. You may have to update some words, but the decision itself is going to be, the core decision is going to be about the same thing. So what will not be present? Same thing, no types of user notifications at all. So no emails, no text messages, nothing like that, which under old WFDS, we had that capacity, we had that capability, but unfortunately we don't have that yet under new WFDS. It does sound like they may be able to get that into an update at some point in the near future. If that's the case, that will be helpful. The other thing that is a known limitation is the fire behavior models. Right now, there are no Farsight or no Flab Map type products. Those would be the near term and short term fire behavior products that we used to get out of WFDS, old WFDS. You can use IFTDIS though, and we're going to go over some IFTDIS fire modeling today to kind of show what you can do with IFTDIS and at least look at what a minimum travel time run would buy you, either as an IC or as an agency administrator. So I don't know how many people were able to take part in the RDNA refresher that was about a month ago, maybe now. I thought it was really cool because Jason Fallon, who is the Intel branch chief of the Wildland Fire Service, actually talked and discussed the importance of WFDS. So, for years I've been hoping that somebody at the national office would, explain how they use WFDS or why WFDS is important and, why we need to be putting the information into our decisions. And I think Jason did a really good job of summarizing a lot of that information and talking about why it's important. Specifically, that bottom bullet there, ISAP. Many of you, if you're working with teams, you probably participated in the ISAP process or the Incident Strategic Alignment process to one degree or the other. We are required by policy. There's Red Book policy that states that for a complex incident, you do have to do a strategic alignment, right? There's a strategic alignment process that has to take place. Now, whether or not you use the ISAP process, or you just work through the WFDS decision, strategic alignment has many definitions that can be accomplished many different ways. So don't get stuck in mindset that there's one single way that you have to do that strategic alignment process. But using that ISAP process, if you use the ISAP process, you're going to hit all the buttons. And you're going to be talking the same language as everybody in the Forest Service, specifically everybody on the complex incident management teams and everybody in the NEMO organizations as well, that's kind of driving that ISAP process. So keep that in mind as we go forward. We talk about some of this as we go through. The roles within WFDS have changed. There were 12 roles in the previous version of WFDS. There's now only 5 roles. So the 5 roles that we're going to be focused on for you guys. Viewer is the default role. If you don't ask for anything, if you don't ask for editor when you request, you're going to get viewer role. You can't do anything with viewer. Editor is the next role up, and then fire behavior analyst, support, and then geographic area editor. And that's the role that I play. As a geographic area editor, that means that I can go into any decision in the geographic area, and I have full edit access into that decision. I can add collaborators. I can delete stuff, I can add stuff, I can do whatever needs to be done. I don't do it unless I'm asked, but sometimes if somebody, steps out or takes an assignment or is otherwise, incapacitated, I can step in and do what needs to be done in the decision. Some of the other roles. Any questions?
I was dominating his steak sandwich.
We're going to talk a lot. We're not going to talk a lot. We're going to talk about fire behavior modeling. Again, I've talked, kind of in my mind, the next step that we can take in our spatial fire planning is the quantified risk assessment process. And whenever you're talking quantified risk assessment processes, fire modeling is a core component of that. So within WFDS, we can do FS Pro modeling that gives us a probabilistic model. There is additional modeling that can be accomplished outside of WFDS that would take an SME, whether they are FBAN qualified or LTAN qualified. Not every analyst is LTAN or FBAN qualified, but there are still very talented fire behavior modelers that are not FBAN or LTAN. And all of those different tools are available, whether you do that locally through the GAE process, a request through me, or within the link tree, there is a risk request form. Again, within the Great Basin region, we're partnering with the risk program, and I know they're going through some transition right now too. So I'm hoping they come out with their feet under them when everything's said and done here in the next few months. But they have a forum set up where any of the fire planners, any of the editors, as soon as you're working on a WFDS decision, I would recommend that you request fire modeling, request an FS Pro run right off the bat. That way you can have that run completed and you can be looking at it in WFDS. And we can use that fire behavior modeling, whether it's an FS Pro run or if we go into NVDIS and do minimum travel time runs. Minimum travel time runs are a deterministic model. They're different than a probabilistic model. If you look at a deterministic model, that will tell you what the model thinks the perimeter is going to look like at the end of the fire. So with those minimum travel time runs, we can actually do that as well. And you can answer different questions looking at that modeling. And that's really the role of an analyst is they want to know what questions do you have, and then they look at what is available to them and they can provide answers and kind of give you what the limitations, restrictions, and maybe the caveats of some of those assumptions are. So these are some considerations within the WFDSS guide. There's this table as well, but we're going to be talking a lot about fire modeling as we go forward in this training. And we've done the WFDSS training. That was part of the spring meeting is we had Kim Ernstrom give us a 90-minute WFDSS fire modeling training, which is available on that link tree. So if you're interested in learning about some of the capabilities of WFDSS and you weren't able to take part in that spring meeting that we did, by all means, watch that YouTube video. It's really good. So, again, WFDSS is part of that informed decision-making process. You know, this could be the slide out of the IRPG that's got the eyeball, you know, and the triangle diagram that we cover in S-130. Same thing in WFDSS. You know, part of that informed decision process is looking at what we have, analyzing the information that we have, making a decision based on that information, and then repeating that process over and over and over again throughout the life of the incident until we reach a successful conclusion. So I did want to talk policy because I do think it's important that we cover at least, you know, what's expected minimally out of policy. So this slide here, we're looking at the 2025 Red Book. I wanted to highlight that the ICs are responsible for assisting with WFDSS documentation and in support in close coordination with the local offices if requested by the delegating agency administrators, and also developing incident objectives, strategies, tactics consistent with the delegation of authority and latest published decision in WFDSS. So again, as an IC3, even as an IC4, if there's a potential that I'm going to be an IC of a fire that has a WFDSS decision done for it, if I want to be able to log in the decision and actually read the decision rationale as it's in WFDSS, you need to have access to WFDSS. So hopefully, you know, that's something we can continue to build. I think it's great that you guys have your battalions in here, and I'm recommending that all the way down the line that we have access for our ICs to get into WFDSS. This is the requirements. And again, for the people that are in here looking at the screen, I apologize. These are really the only requirements for a WFDSS decision. And this is going back to the Red Book, right? So the published decision has to document strategic direction from land and resource management plan and our FMPs. It has to include incident objectives and requirements. It has to include incident management strategies and a course of action, estimated cost, affected jurisdictions, agency administrators, and the framework for the action to be performed in the delegation of authority. So that can get a little confusing if you read too far into that. One of the pro tips that I've seen is for those delegations of authority and those leaders' intent documents, and I'm not thinking more the local letters, more complex incident management team. As you're transitioning your incident and you're transitioning those documents, those can be scanned and included in the WFDSS decision very easily. So I've seen Carson District did some decisions last year where they did that, worked out really good, and I would highly recommend that be part of your process too, as far as documenting some of that initial leaders intent letter information and delegation of authority from the Wildland Fire Service. So when do we need to do WFDSS? Again, initial decision, there is no set hard date. The policy is when the fire escapes initial attack, or when it exceeds initial response, or when it includes objectives with both protection and resource benefit elements consistent with land use planning documents. So that's really the only requirement by policy for a WFDSS decision is escapes initial attack or exceeds initial response. So for Nevada fires, anywhere within that 3 to 5 day window, right? If, you know, you guys, I think the sports fire is a great example. If you got the capacity, day one, if you're willing to get in there and start working on a decision, get in there and start working on your decision and be ready to publish. If you've got a decision that's ready to publish, even if you caught the fire on day 2, day 3, go ahead and publish it, right? I mean, that shows the documentation, that shows the work that you put into that decision, even if you caught that fire. But by Red Book policy, this is the only requirement right here. The new decision triggers, of course, if the periodic assessment indicates that the course of action is no longer valid, that's going to trigger a new decision. If the fire moves beyond the planning area boundary, if it exceeds the cost, or if the RCA indicates that the incident is existing, its management capability, meaning if you've extended the team, right? You're in type 3 and you really should have a complex sense of management team on it, or vice versa, if you're type 4 and you need a type 3 fire. So some of those considerations when the new decision may be needed is costs are expected to exceed the final costs in the current decision, or management action points have changed since the current decision was published. Management action points are really no longer a thing in WFDS. This is still old language that needs to be edited out of the Red Book. I hope that in the 2026 they do, but those are still triggers. But one of the things that I'm talking to in this training, and I don't know how much we talked to it last year, is there needs to be kind of a mind shift for our WFDS decision. At least when I did WFDS decision and WFDS Classic, my goal was to publish the first decision and make that decision cover the fire and from cradle to grave, right? And that was my goal, because that was with the planning area, with the cost, you didn't want to, limit yourself too much. With this next generation, now every time you do a periodic assessment, you're republishing a decision. That's all you're doing. So if you need to update a decision, update the cost, right? I mean, republishing a decision is not, it's an easy process in WFDS now. Every time a bureau representative on Wildland Fire Service Agency Administrator goes into WFDS and does a periodic assessment, that's all they're doing, is they're republishing the decision. So any of this information that needs to be edited, that can be edited, and you can just call it a periodic assessment. It doesn't have to be called a whole new decision, because that's all you're doing is you're just putting that in the decision rationale, hitting the approve button and republishing it, right? So you're thinking about it that way. There is language in the Red Book specific to jurisdictional agencies and their involvement in WFDS. And this goes both ways. This protects those smaller agencies by saying this gives them a seat at the table, right, for WFDS decisions. And at the same time, this is what we need to follow, is we are normally the big brother land management agency in most of these decisions. So we need to be cognizant that not all jurisdictions are represented by approving agencies. And one way or the other, one of these paragraphs covers the criteria that they need to be involved, whether or not that decision, multiple jurisdictions, they may have had an initial threat, but then that threat was mitigated. And on day 2, they were no longer a player, so that could be a consideration. Or they could actually we used to call it a management action point. Now it'd be a strategic course of action. You can draw a line in the sand in the map and say, if the fire reaches this trigger, agency will re-engage as a decision approver again. So there's a lot of different ways you can accomplish that, but the language for how those jurisdictional agencies are involved is all covered in the Red Book.
Where exactly where's the best place to
Decision rationale.
that engagement? Obviously, Humboldt County, Pershing County, they're going to say whatever you think, and it's all checkerboard. So there's no line in the sand that you can necessarily draw on a large fire anyways.
Right.
Because, and really one square to the other square is pretty much the same resource value, I don't know. So just in the rationale.
Ways to those agencies that they don't even have to be in WFDS, right?
You have a change with the jurisdictional fire chief and
exactly.
Unified command.
Yep.
Dylan, go back to the periodic assessment. If you actually do an update, when you republish it, is there anywhere where it shows what was changed, or you gotta make sure everybody knows that?
All it does is it adds on to the information.
Okay.
So,
That's easy.
yeah, if you republish a decision, it takes whatever information was in there, and unless you edit it, it just carries it over. So, but that's a discussion that approvers, agency administrators need to have whenever you do that, is if you do change anything, what does that process look like between your small group to make sure that's communicated, right? So yeah, that's a great consideration that you need to make. Yeah, there's a lot of colors in this one. So in this one here, really the point of this is, so I wanted to talk a little bit about ISAP, and within that instrument strategic alignment process, the very first pillar is critical values of risk. And if we can identify those critical values of risk within our initial WFDSS decision, you're going to set that incoming team up for success and help them along in that process, because that's usually in the way we've done strategic planning over the last few years, trying to transition into this new way we do things. Usually on day 1, day 2 of the team, that's the team getting their feet under them, kind of figuring everything out, figuring out, what values are important, what do they need to protect, how are they going to protect them, what resources do they need? Right? All that information is kind of being figured out the first couple of days. Where if we can put those critical values at risk and put this decision and help stand up that operations section on day 0, day 1, that's going to speed everything up in that strategic alignment process up in days 3, 4, and 5. So in days 3, 4, and 5, instead of them just kind of hitting their feet and getting their pace going, it's going to help them. So this is the process that we talk about with strategic alignment. Again, the ISAP process is one way that you can accomplish strategic alignment, but strategic alignment can be done in multiple different ways. Usually it's the core of that process is looking at the WFDSS decision and looking at what is the operational considerations that need to be made and what are the safety considerations for those operational considerations, and then working through that process that way. But strategic alignment can be done. You can do it in Google Earth, you can do it in WFDSS, you can do it on a paper map, you can do it on a variety of different ways. So, but by doing that, by getting those critical values at risk identified early, we can set that process up for success. The other thing that I wanted to highlight too is, and we'll get into the guide here in a little bit, but I do provide oversight to every decision that's published. And one of the things that I started using last year was a tool that I called the WFDSS Scorecard. It's a tool that I developed as a SOPL to when I come into a unit or a forest primarily, and they have multiple decisions that have been going for months at a time. This is a matrix that I've used to assess those decisions and kind of figure out which ones need the most work, which ones need the most attention, and maybe which ones can wait a little bit longer. But I've adapted it to a scorecard basically where I score the WFDSS decisions on 20 elements that, in my opinion, helps to create a better WFDSS decision. And all of those elements are in the score, are in the WFDSS guide as well. But I did want to highlight that that's a tool that's available as well. And then lastly, before we get into WFDSS itself, Brock asked me to cover this, and this is probably a lot more important a month and a half ago than it is right now, because I know that over the last month and a half, you guys have looked at these authorities tables and you've covered them, at length. But I do think it's important just to highlight for a few things like Spatial Fire Planning Service data. For my role as a fire planner, what that tells me is that sometime here in the next year, if we don't develop a national process locally within the Great Basin, we need to develop some sort of process that we can go out to the bureaus every year, review the data that they have in Spatial Fire Planning Service, get whatever updates they know they're going to have to their data, and then get those updates in the Spatial Fire Planning Service before fire season, right? And make sure that that data is ready to go in WFDSS. So this is, a new process because the Bureau is still going to have the data. So the Bureau will provide land and resource planning, spatial and supporting data to the Fire Service. And then the Fire Service will update spatial fire planning data throughout this process. The other key thing that I wanted to highlight was the difference between agency administrators and Bureau representatives. I think we hit that quite a bit. The agency administrator qualification is no longer a thing. The agency administrator role is entirely a thing. So don't get the agency administrator qualification and the agency administrator role confused, because the AADM qual is really, I think it's still in IQCS, but On the Bureau side, they're going to be designing their own training standards and whatever it looks like. And in most cases, on the Bureau side, the position itself is all you need to have that authority. You don't need to go through any kind of training requirements or whatever else. The position that you have and the delegated authorities that normally come with that position are the authorities that you need to exercise. Incident management team ordering, again, I know we've talked about this, but the Bureau and the fire service will jointly in-brief incident management teams. That's why I know that you guys have developed products locally. We could talk through those today. For the units that don't have product locally, I've got what we've done for Nevada BLM that can be adopted to any district in the state as well, that can be used for briefing those incident management teams as well. Fire decision approvals. So again, this is a new change. Both the Bureau and the fire service will approve WFDSS decisions. So that means that, you know, if we cross the district line, if we cross a Great Basin unit line, that their approvers come into that mix, you know, and we add those approvers in just like we would any other scenario. Smoke management is another thing that I wanted to highlight here too, because ever since 2019, the Dingle Act was passed in 2019. The Dingle Act requires us to take a more proactive management of wildfire smoke. And part of that is a requirement to order air resource advisors on complex incidents. And that's something that we as the fire service are responsible for under these authorities, is making sure that those air resource advisors are ordered and are worked into the organization as appropriate. So that's something we need to be considering as well. And then the WFDSS training, I always thought, you know, I highlighted, I thought this was pretty cool that the WFDSS training actually made a line item in the authorities table, but we're well ahead of the authorities that we're already accomplishing the WFDSS training. And how we do WFDSS training in the future, we're still working that out. You know? We still hope that we can do the in-person trainings, but I think we covered, you know, in COVID that it is possible to do virtual trainings and get large groups through virtual trainings, but we'll figure out what that looks like. But that'll be a requirement going forward too, is that we're going to require bureaus to use WFDSS. We, the fire service, will have to provide some basic level of training to make sure they're supported and can get in. All right. Air resource advisors. The requirement is on a complex instance.
You ordered them before?
I've been awarded them. I've worked with them next year. Oh, yeah, they're all technical specialists. They typically work for EPA. Most of them will come out of the southern region. And again, you know, a lot of things are changing in the government, but yeah, most of the air resource advisors that I've worked with are ordered as technical specialists. And you coordinate with the Forest Service, and they're the ones who have direct access to EPA. Any questions on any of that information? Okay, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And if you guys can come back in here at 10 after 9, we'll get going on the WFDSS section.
But actually, I did that to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like our no stars.
Oh, yeah, I know, that's something which means, so. Here today. Okay. The launch, car reports. No, it's. Stay away, but.
And then we used to,
But it, thanks for you. Not much more.
Yeah, I just approved the whole.
Yeah, more right now.
He's good. And they're. So everybody with that. So for anybody that went in and requested roles and family, I should have you approved now. So for this next section, making sure I'm sharing my screen. Sure I'm unmuted. Here's the training where if you guys want to work along with me, you should be able to. I'm going to get back out and go to the witness main screen now. Again, these are links on the link tree if you need to find where we're at, but I want to highlight a couple of different things from the home screen here for WFDSS. One is the two different platforms that you can log into. So notice these are the two accounts that you requested. WFDSS Production is WFDSS Prod. WFDSS Training is EDU. You'll know which one you're in based off the banner. If I log into WFDSS Prod, give it a second, it's authenticating. It's doing that. I'm going to go back in because I've already logged into WFDSS EDU on this side to show that the banner going across the top of the EDU screen is green. So we should all be working in the green screen today. If you are working in the, is that black? Whatever dark color. If it's not green, you're in the wrong platform. Okay? That's the point. If it's not green, you're in the wrong platform. It is kind of annoying because everything you do in the EDU side, you have to do in the prod side as well. So like in the profile thing that I'm going to show you right now, we're going to go view profile, say okay, because I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, this is the screen. Whether you're on production or whether you're in EDU, it looks the same except for the banner. So from this screen, you want to make sure that your geographic area is set to Great Basin. The unit, you can get in here and you can find your unit and you can select your unit if you want, but it's a known bug in WFDSS that as soon as you log out of your profile and then log back in, the no unit thing will pop back up. So don't even worry about the unit, just leave it for now. If you want to check these notification boxes, you can, but it's not going to do anything. So it's another one of my, beefs with WFDSS. They put all this stuff in there like there are notifications because they need to plan for the future development. But if it doesn't work, it seems like a nice little note next to it saying not currently functional would sure be nice, right? But anyway, you can go ahead and select those now if you want. In the past, you used to be able to get text notifications. Hopefully we can get that in the future, but as of now, that's still not a capability in WFDSS. For agency, I haven't even looked at this yet. I don't know if Wildland Fire Service is, U.S. Fire Service is not even in this list yet. So we still need to add ourselves as an agency to our own decision support system. Go ahead and just keep BLM selected in there now. If you put a secondary address, you'll get, you won't get emails to the secondary address, but that does show up in the contact information within WFDSS, which is important. And the big one here is approver. So again, I'm going to uncheck this now. The only reason I've checked this approver is for training. I'm going to uncheck it though, just to show you that this right here is the only certification you have to do to make yourself an approver in WFDSS. So anybody can do that. Any editor has the ability to go in there and do this. All you're doing is by checking this box, you certify that you meet your agency policy to act as agency administrator. In WFDS, you're responsible for reviewing the decision, writing the rationale, and approving the decision prior to publication. Approval authority for each agency is described in Chapter 11 of the Red Book. So I agree to that, and I am an approver. And then you always want to hit save. Whenever you see the save button in blue, that means that you've made some sort of edit, and you need to hit save in order to send your edits up to WFDS and actually save them. So keep that in mind, but that's how you access your profile. Under GAE, this is the tab I think only I have. You can go under system preferences, and if you want to set your map to be either my home, incidents, reports, notifications, it speeds up how you log into WFDS. I always go incidents because I live in the map, so I need the map. But if you're not necessarily doing a lot of work in the map, you may just want to have my home selected as your initial page. And what that does is it takes you to this tab right here. And there's a few other options you can set down here as well, but I'll show you what my home is. My home is just, it's a non-map product, so it loads up really quick, which is a nice thing to have. Any of the incidents that, and if I click on see more, you can see all the information. My active incidents, these are all the incidents that I am a collaborator in one way or another, whether as an approver or just an editor. You can also, if you close that, you can add incidents into your watch list. So this would be a really handy thing that if you have multiple fires going on your jurisdiction, add every single one of them into your watch list, and then you can have this table that you can look at, and basically all the information that's in the WFDS decision. I mean, there's a lot more in the WFDS decision, obviously, but this is a good summary of information for a lot of those decisions. You can view those right here in this table, or if you want to click on the incident and go to the incident itself, you can do that by clicking on any of those incidents. So then that My Home section, go ahead and go back to incidents, because for the incident that we're working in today, so we're going to go into the actual incident itself. To do that, you have to zoom in and click on the little WFDS emblem. And then once you click on the WFDS emblem, you can either go to decision or you can click on it from the tab over here as well. So there's a couple different ways you can access an incident from the map. You should never have to build within WFDS training. You can build an incident. You can, drop a pin on a map and say that's the point of origin and create an incident. In WFDS production, you should never have to do that. All of that is done through the CAD system in WFDS. So the dispatch gets the phone call when they go into Wildcat, when they build that initial information. That information is what goes into fire code. That information is what goes into Wildcat E. That information is what builds all of the point of origin, all of the jurisdictional information that starts the incident. If any of that information is wrong in WFDS, always call dispatch and have them correct it in CAD, because then it'll feed to all of the other systems that use the information. Where if you try to edit the information in WFDS, you're severing the data link between Irwin and whatever that service was, and you're now overriding it with WFDS. So just keep that in mind.
Dylan has our point of origin for the Courts fire about several miles south of where the fire is.
Yep.
I'm assuming dispatch didn't update that, what they originally had as the.
You just call dispatch, IC or whoever should call dispatch and say it needs to be updated.
And they might have updated it, but it could have been pretty late, because when I got into the WFDS to start making it, I tried to change the ignition spot, and that's probably when he said it severed that connection.
Because
I went in to try to move it.
So moral of the story is call dispatch, have them fix it there, so it starts at the beginning and pushes all the way through the whole system.
Yep, exactly. So from here, we're going to go to the decision. I'll be able to get Brad, you approved here in just a second. Because at this point, I'm gonna highlight a couple different things, and I use this as kind of a catch-up to get all the approvals done and make sure we've got people in the decision. But really, what I want to point out is as this map is loading, I'm gonna go back over here and go to the guide. So again, this is in the link tree. You can go through this table here. All of this information is not required by policy, but again, this is information that I put into that scorecard. And as you're completing your WFDSS decision, if you click on these links, it'll take you to either the map or the source of the information, where it's usually just a simple screenshot, copy paste that into your decision, you're done. That's all it takes. So that has been incorporated into the guide at the suggestion of the FMO group, based off of our fall meeting, I think. But really what I want to get into is the guide itself, and just kind of the nuts and bolts of the guide. This has been a 10-year obsession with me anyways.
It's your life on.
From the last 10 years of my life, which are the only years that matter to me. I've been building this over the years. It's kind of set up to flow like WFDSS, and that you can click in each of these sections and it'll take you to the section of the guide. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds with the guide, but this is a cut and paste type guide. So we've got all the information. We're going to cover all this. We talked about fire behavior modeling. That table is in here as well. As you get into your WFDSS decisions, don't feel like you're stuck and you can't get information that you need to put into boxes. Every box in the relative risk, the information in the guide can be copied and pasted into your WFDSS decision. And then you can go through it and update it if you want to, or you can leave the information in there that's as is. But the guide is set up to give you a template that you can cut and paste from, and at least get that initial information in your decision to start building those discussions, or start building that additional write-up that you and your FMO or your representative are going to have. So as we go through this training today, I'll highlight some of that today, but basically all that information has been loaded into this decision and went pretty quickly. I mean, I didn't have a lot of time to spend with your guys' training decision because of the holiday and so forth, but I have loaded in all of the information into this incident that we're going to be working in today, just to kind of speed up the process. But going back to the guide, the first couple pages of the guide is getting into the map. And what I was trying to get across in this page of the guide are, these are the things that as a SOPL, if I come into a decision and I want to get my situational awareness of the incident, this is what I look at first. And these are the map, this is the map that I look at first. So what I'd like to do is, this is where I just kind of give you guys the next 15, 20 minutes. And within WFDSS, if you want to log into this incident, you can. If you want to just look at it through the homepage, through the incident's homepage, you can. But basically just go through the map. The map is a little buggy. You'll notice here, it takes a while to load. Sometimes if it doesn't load, simply zooming in is enough to get it to refresh, and send that signal to get it to refresh. Another tip that you can do is tab over. What you don't want to do is hit the refresh button. Okay, just try to get that out of your lexicon of things to do when you're frustrated with connection. That'll take so long to load everything up, where if you just click on one of these tabs and then tab back, that basically just kind of resends the information, and it sends up to the map and tries to load everything in. So you will see latency issues with the map. Sometimes it'll take a little bit long to load, but when you get into the map, go through and look at all of these layers, right? I mean, starting at the incident layer, and this is where I just want you guys to work on your own for the next 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to go in and I'm going to be doing some additional approvals to make sure we can get the people in there. Go through there, click on all the different layers that are available. There is analysis in there. So if you guys want to take a look at, some of that FS Pro analysis, you can take a look at the FS Pro results down here. Again, that takes a little while to load. Again, you have to check the route, make sure that if you select anything down below, that you come up to that route directory and select that as well in order to get the map to load it. National Incident Reference, everything that goes into the NIFs is available. So IC3s, when you're out there collecting your data, division breaks, as soon as you submit them in your field maps within that whatever half hour, 45-minute process that it takes to upload up to the National Incident Feature Service, that information can be viewed in WFDS, right? So again, we're pulling in all of this spatial information into a single service and making it dynamic based off of these other services updating themselves. Fire safety, again, go through those layers, take a look at them, understand what they are, understand what they're telling you. A lot of those layers can also be looked at on the RMA dashboard, but those layers are available through here. The other thing that I want you to kind of play around with and not just, look at is the export function of the map. And I'm gonna just kind of zoom out here and create a really basic map. You can argue that WFDS is probably the easiest platform for an IC3 to make themselves a map out of if you're in the field and you need to make a map. If you come down here, as long as you're loading your data into National Instant Feature Service, once it's available through that service in WFDS, you can print the map. And if you print out a PDF, that is a georeferenced PDF map that is produced out of AGOL. So you can load that map into Avenza, you can load that map into field maps, you can load that map into whatever you wanted to do. But what I'd like you guys to play with is, in addition to the PDF maps, you can export your map as a JPEG. And what that does is, when we get into the text editor portion of WFDS, whether you do a screen capture, copy and paste, or you do an import JPEG, that's how you bring your support information into your WFDS decision. It's through JPEG. So play around with that map, and you can export your map down here. It takes a few minutes sometimes, depending on how big the map is, and then you can view your map. That one was pretty quick. I'm going to go ahead and just click on it, save it. It saves. Go ahead and open it. See that this would be a JPEG that I can either copy and paste directly into a decision or hack, right? And that's just clicking a couple buttons. So this time is yours. Spend the next 10, 15 minutes just going through the maps, playing with the maps. I've had units, if you want to do a map making contest, show me who can make the coolest map. Seriously, it's the best way for you guys to figure out what layers are in there. So yeah, just play around with those layers, take a look and figure out what's in there, and be thinking about this incident. Look at it on the map and what is important to you. What would you want to communicate through that map, and be thinking about where in that decision do you think that's most appropriate. So GIS specialist actually improving it.
So is that the layers by dragging and dropping to eliminate clutter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do with this map. The slider feature, the swipe tool is a cool one too. If I wanted to just take burn probability, swipe that down. See here, I could zoom in and look at the legend too, but you can use that swipe tool. Really, if you look at it like this and trying to find, usually I can get rid of this bar entirely. It's not letting me do that for whatever reason. Usually you can slide the map over like that. And then, like I said, you go into your base map gallery and you pick the nape layers, any of the imagery layers, any of that information, obviously, and overlay that into your map or put that in your base map. And that makes all that information a lot more relevant too, especially when you use that slider bar. You can slide down and take a look at different things. So yeah, there's a lot of cool capabilities within the mapping side of AGOL. I'm going to get that turned off so I can get back to here. I heard people talking pods, PCLs, I think that's a good thing for sure. Obviously, one of the first things that we look at in the decision is the planning area. And in this case here, I'm gonna go down to the analysis and turn the analysis off for right now. And then come back up and check that initial planning area boundary. That initial planning area boundary, I believe, is a 7 mile by 7 mile box. I guess I can measure it and find out. It might be a 5 mile box. That's gonna be the initial extent of the planning area if you don't do anything else. With this is just gonna default to that as that initial planning area boundary. So yeah, a couple of the things you can do for that planning area boundary when you're initially looking at it, you know, and I heard this discussion from Donovan is the pod boundaries. So if you guys come down here into operational fire planning and just polygons. So here's kind of a cool thing you can do now too, right? You can take a look at just those polygons. And so we know that, you know, are we going to use that initial planning area boundary? Donovan, what are you going to want to
We're
do?
gonna want to figure.
Donovan's going to want it bigger, right?
Probably since it's overlapping several current pods, is to incorporate those whole pods, then you want to like ground truth that with your modeling and stuff like that to see, are you big enough? So you're not having to automatically redo a decision because you outgrow your planning area.
Yeah, exactly. So we can accomplish that a couple different ways, right? Both of them, we're going to need to use the drawing tool. So if you guys want to follow along with me, you can. If you don't want to follow along, you don't need to either. This is one of the coolest features in WFDSS though that I've found is the ability to select a feature. And if you want to use that feature, like say, for example, we know that we're going to use this pod in combination with, and I'll just go through it just to show you guys what we're going to do. So let's say we want to use this pod, this pod, this pod, and this pod as a polygon. I'm going to demonstrate just using one for sure, because this is a really easy way. If you just want to clip that pod and use that, all you got to do is say copy feature. Once you say copy feature, come over here. No. Yeah. Let's do that one more time. Going to.
Now, we're getting that number.
Okay. Select pod. I'm going to go into here before I say copy feature. I am going to, and it's not giving me that for whatever reason. So we're going to just call it a user-defined strategic shape. We're going to call it pod boundary for now. And we can select it, copy the feature, and then from here, you can save it. And what that does, is there somebody editing the planning area boundary right now? In the incident, I was wondering why I wasn't able to select planning area.
There you go, Brad.
I'm wondering if maybe there's somebody editing at the same time.
It's only one person.
Exactly. So, the other thing that you can do is, again, I'm going to tab over to relative risk just because I want to clear the map off.
Dylan, did you say you could do multiple, like, do you like hold like shift or control?
Yeah, that's the problem is I can't demonstrate right now. You can't do multiple polygons. You can grab all 4 of those polygons and then you can use the drawing tool though, and just draw a polygon around them. Because one of the things, and I'm sure you guys have figured this out too, is if you clip your planning area just to the pod boundary, we clip those direct to road systems, right? So if you want to buffer your planning area
Yeah, it
at
doesn't
all,
leave you any room for a slot. If you got a critical holding area and you get a 20-acre slot, big deal. You don't want to have to redo
exactly.
another decision because you're outside of that.
Right.
So
Yep, exactly.
I've always just,
Dylan, where's the drawing tool at?
This pencil right here.
Yeah, I don't have that, so.
You don't have that? Any of this stuff, that's, you need to log out and log back in because what we've been doing is either adding you in FAMA or adding you in WFDSS over the last few minutes. So if you don't have any of the tools that we've been talking about.
from viewer to editor.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you should be able to use this drawing tool. Again, you can come over here. I still don't know why I can't edit the planning area boundary. That's news to me. So I'm gonna go back. I want to figure this out. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and log out, and log back in. Sure, that'll fix it. That tool, and it's giving it to me. So I'm gonna go back into the map layers. Fire planning again, get our pods layer. Yeah. Stay. This planning area with a new sketch. Yeah, okay. So you can just do that.
Would you do that multiple times?
No, that's the limitation in WIF. In WIF, it sees it as multiple polygons and it'll give you an error message that your planning area.
If you're inside one, it works really well. Otherwise.
Otherwise, you have to go, you do the hand drawing tool.
And that's like you said, not buffering when it does that. It just
Yep.
clips into it. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, always.
Yep. So there's a couple different ways. Like I said, you can either do it that way. And then if you want, like I said, the other way is to. And this is kind of buggy too. So I do want to demonstrate this because there's been some latency issues with the map. But in this case, what I would do is I would zoom out enough where I can see all of those pod boundaries. And it's just a matter of clicking on your polygon tool. And the first two clicks are the most important here. So I know, let's say there's a threat of a north wind, right? And we know that there's potential for maybe this fire to move a little bit to the south. Click down there and you can see the latency. I've clicked twice in the map and it's still not showing up. There's a little bit of issue with the drawing tool. Yeah, super frustrating. And they talked about it all the time. I'm trying to get it to work and it's not working. I'm trying to demonstrate it again. Planning area. Yeah, see, it's super slow in here. So I would tend to stay away from the drawing tool, especially when you're demonstrating it to a large group of people, because it can get really frustrating. And I'm sure, how long did it take? I mean, it took a while. Yeah, it takes me like 5-10 minutes every time still, and it frustrates the hell out of me. So
It's a very quick process.
yes, yeah, and it should be pretty quick. So be patient with that. That is a known bug. We bring it up every WFDSS office hours that they do, and we get told that they're working on it. So hopefully that does get
It's like
fixed.
one of the most basic of all actions.
Yeah, right. And it does have something to do with the latency, you know, so they're trying to figure out how to make the map load up a little faster. But yeah, that is one of the basic tools. And I'm going to try again here because there doesn't seem like there's any kind of rhyme or reason for how it works.
Well, you're not even getting.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna bang my head against it through it. So, but we've got our planning area though. So, but Donovan brought up some really good points, right? With that planning area, there's some discussion. There's discussion that needs to happen with the planning area. And what I tell people is if you're bringing me in as a fire planner to do a decision for you, if you can give me what you want as your planning area, I can do 95% of the rest of the workload to get you a draft decision and then have the rest of the group come in and either refine it or make it better, do whatever needs to be done. But that planning area box is really important because you need to know how wide of an area, how big of an extent are we looking at, right? So yeah, there's a couple different ways. One is modeling. So in this case, you would look back into the analysis, and I'm going to go through each of those FS Pro results that are in here. Take off the average flame length, take off the average burn height for now. Look at the analysis again. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because, even with the limitations that we know exist within our fire modeling, FS Pro is still the best science available as far as probability of that fire impacting an area outside of the perimeter. And that's what needs to be talked to when you look at these FS Pro models. Is a lot of people get confused and they see the different probability bands. That's the different colors that you're seeing. Those are not perimeters. Okay, those are probability bands that anywhere within that band, there is a, let me bring up the legend so you guys can see what the legend is. But these are, this is the legend here. So anywhere within this initial yellow, red area, there's 80 to 100%, 60, 79, greater than a 40% chance that this area is going to be burned, be impacted by fire. Not being that it's going to be a flaming front passing through it, just that pixel in the model got burned by one of the 1,000 iterations of different modeled fires that it modeled in its running. Anytime you get outside this 50% probability, anywhere outside the yellow, there's less than 50% chance that happens, right? So that's really the area that you're looking at, is you're looking at that 50% line. And anywhere within that 50% line, high probability of that fire impacting those values. Anywhere outside, low probability of the fire impacting those values based off of the assumptions of the model being ran at the time. Okay, so there's no suppression action being taken. All of these models assume zero suppression action, right? So if you do have suppression action going on that is going to be successful in holding a fire, that's when you have those discussions with your fire analyst and you talk about whether or not that be an appropriate failure. So those are the discussions that you have with your analyst to help get you a better run, a better calibrated model. With this initial run that you get just off of FS Pro, that's going to give you a lot of information that you need to look at in determining how big of a planning area do we need? Does it need to be huge? Can it become less small? And B, if the model assumes this is going to be the spread, what value is going to be impacted, right? And then you can start looking at the analysis, right? So this is the probability of those values being impacted anywhere within this, fire area. And then if you come back in here to the analysis and you go back into the FS Pro results, you can start looking at some different variables. So here we can look at average flame length, right? And when we look at average flame length within the FS Pro runs, we're looking at, just based off of, this is basic fire behavior, right? This is what's done in basic fire behavior. The same fire behavior model we've been doing for years. But this will tell you within those areas, the model predicts that you're going to get greater than 25-foot flame lengths, 11 to 25, less than 11 foot. So you can use that to kind of help you decide what is that impact to those values going to be, right? Is it going to be catastrophic? Are you going to get 25-foot flame lengths? It's going to burn whatever natural resource characteristics you had out of the soil. Or is it going to be somewhat less, as you're going to have lesser fire behavior, lesser flame lengths, and that impact to those values could be less based off of the basic fire behavior that you get out of FS Pro. Maybe one of the newer features that you see in the FS Pro are these average arrival times. So again, you look at that and it's easy to misinterpret that as a perimeter. That's not a perimeter. That's just saying that anywhere within this band, the model is predicting that occurring within these windows, right? Depending on burn period and how far out in the future the run was done for. But you can use this to determine how much time you have, right? So again, we go back to that quantified risk analysis. Using fire behavior modeling, you can get a very coarse understanding of the probability of your fire impacting values, how long you have until those impacts are, and until those values are impacted, and also what type of fire behavior is going to impact those values? And is that going to be catastrophic, or is that going to be anything less than catastrophic, right? And you can help start defining some of those ISAP criteria based off of that model behavior there. So that's some of the fire behavior modeling and some of the analysis you can look at. The reason I bring that up though is because when you do that analysis, and somebody's keying right into it here, you want to use that to inform your planning area, right? So if your planning area, if the model is showing that there's a greater than 50% chance of that fire escaping your planning area, you may want to draw your planning area maybe a little bit bigger. Not saying you have to, but that's going to be a consideration of you going forward through your incident.
And then what's another way to help validate that? And say, your model's telling you one thing, but your gut's telling you something else because maybe you've seen that fire in that area. So you can go to your historic perimeters in there and kind of see what fires have done historically in that area. And maybe there's something that the model's not catching and could help you to not have to redraw that planning area and redo a decision for that too. Super large. So just places that we get, repeated large fires and stuff, kind of get a feel.
Showing some, yeah, I'd have to look and see what years they're pulling here and where these records are coming from. But yeah, it sure seems like there's a little bit more history in there, right?
Buffalo, Gray, Marigold, Lone, all be kind of last year's.
Oh, that stuff's still in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
This one here, so you can see the WFDSS fire perimeters and then the interagency fire perimeters. I'm not sure where that's pulling from. There should be. There's a lot of others, boundaries. Boundaries are consideration. The reality is, you look at jurisdictional boundaries and people will draw planning areas based off of jurisdictional boundaries. So, whether that's right or wrong, that's not for me to say as a fire planner, but that's something that when you're drawing those planning areas, you're going to want to take a look at that as well. In this case, we did talk about, control features as well. So if, there's a potential that I-80 is going to be used as a control feature, definitely buffer out a little ways. So you can utilize that for burnout operations or whatever, and you have a little bit of a buffer. But that planning area boundary, that initial planning area boundary is going to be important because that's what's going to define the rest of your decision, basically. And you're going to build this initial decision based off of this planning area boundary. And when you get to that point, the other important thing that you need to do in this map is spatial inventory, right? So WFDSS does have the ability to do spatial inventory. And the reason why we want to focus on the planning area, we're going to use current. Whenever somebody updates the planning area boundary, you need to tell WFDSS to update that spatial inventory again, because the last spatial inventory that was done was based off the old planning area boundary. So we're just going to go ahead and generate that. And as we generate that, it's going to spin. But I can go ahead and show a few of the features, right, that we can look at as part of that spatial inventory. And this is just a real coarse assessment of some of the information that's available. But again, you can look at boundaries, you can look at all these rows. In this case, there's a total of 66 pieces of data, 66 GIS layers that are available within that spatial inventory. You can look at each of those on this list, or you can download this CSV file right here. If I hit save, let that open up. Be a better way to look at it, So through here, see housing units, you can see all the different spatial fire planning data, so you can, how many acres of GHMA, how many acres of OHMA, how many acres of PHMA, all of that information is loaded into the spatial inventory. So you can look at that in WFDS, you can export that as a CSV, but really, once you draw that planning area, this is the table. This is what you sit down between Wildland Fire Service Agency administrators and you start identifying what are those values of risk? What are our priorities, right? What can we protect? What makes sense to protect? What doesn't make sense to protect? And this is that initial spatial inventory that gives you the list of those values that in coordination with SMEs, in coordination, this is where those conference calls between ICs, resource advisors come in handy as well at this stage of the incident when you're doing this planning. But glean that information through whatever way you can to figure out what your values at risk are within that planning area boundaries and how you're going to document those and prioritize those for whatever you got coming in, whether it's a team, type 3 team, whatever it happens to be. So any questions on that? So once we do that course map, we have the planning area boundary. At least at that point, then we go through the collaborator list, right? And this is something that Kyle's been working on as we've been going through this. So there's some new terminology in the collaborator list. The point of contact used to be called an owner, right? Now they're called a point of contact. There can only be one point of contact in the WFDSS decision. So as a point of contact, why that's important is if you know that you're the point of contact on a WFDSS decision and you go somewhere, whether that be to a fire or whether that be the days off or whether that be to the hospital because you got hit by a bus, you need to make sure that somebody is the point of contact. As a GAE, I can go in and I can make anybody else a point of contact, but only a GAE has that ability outside the point of contact. So if the point of contact doesn't do it, it takes a phone call to the GAE. I go in there, do whatever needs to be done, fix it up for you, you're good to go. But as a point of contact, if you can just make it a process to where if you know you're going to be unavailable, somebody has to take that role over for you. Make sure that that person is identified as that point of contact in WFDSS before you leave. Collaborators, any of the collaborators used to be called authors. So as a collaborator, any of these folks are able to author anything in the decision. If you're not listed as a collaborator, you're not going to be able to edit anything in the decision as is. Fire behavior analysts, those don't get assigned just yet. There's still a process that they're working through with new WFDSS. And then the approvers, you have to have at least one approver, but within this list is where you can edit those collaborators. So you can add people, whether they are approvers, whether they are collaborators or points of contact. One of the buggy things with WFDSS that you have to be aware of, and I think this caught a few of us too, is that this list that we populate, the only way your name gets into that list by you logging into the platform. If you haven't logged into WFDSS EDU or if you haven't logged into WFDSS production, your name is not even available in the list of collaborators for us to add. So if you're going into a unit to help them with the WFDSS decision, make sure you log in, just make sure everything's logged in because that way they're going to be able to add you as a collaborator. That way the system knows who is actual authenticated users and who's not. If they can't find you in that list, it's because you haven't logged into the platform. And then all you have to do is log in, they have to log out, and then it keys something in the system and we can add you as a user. But it gets really hard in EDU because EDU you use once a year. The only time any of you are going to log into EDU is today, probably. Maybe Kyle. I think I'm selling Kyle short. I think Kyle logs into EDU a lot. But the rest of you, you're probably going to log into EDU once, right? So even on EDU, that's how it works, is you have to make sure that you're logged into the platform before your name comes up here as a collaborator list. So the rest of this, I was hoping that we could format more like an actual WFDSS decision, because we're really to the point now where either in the relative risk section or the strategy section, that's where we build most of the decision. And this is where, like the Chads, the Donovan, to hear what you guys' process is. I mean, and not everyone's through with this decision in recent times, but I know you guys have. What's your process, Brian? What do you like to do when you get multiple fires and?
Well, once we've kind of got that initial prioritization, we can just go back to last year. Several fires starting at the same time, figure out what we're getting a handle on, what we're not, what's going to be problematic. A lot of that's just based on talking with the ICs and looking at big picture and trying to life safety, public safety, that's usually pretty big. So that was Barber last year. The stuff on 95, yeah, it had some, some things with it, some, complexities with it, but they were also getting handled pretty quick. So once we've got those priority incidents, it was Barber the first day, and then the next day, it started with the B. We had a lot of B fires last year. Start working on the WFDSS on that, and usually that's getting with the fire planner, whoever's going to be designated to do that, to start coming up with the sideboards for it. And then when we start getting into complexity analysis and values at risk and stuff, we'll bring the administrators in from last year. This year it'll be the agency reps, but it's the same process. We have a resource advisor. They can be advising on things that they're aware of in those areas. And we start developing that complexity and looking at the values at risk and what that course of action is going to look like. We know it's going to be full suppression. We're not managing fires out here. It'll all be full suppression. And just making sure we've got our complexity correct for it. And we managing that internally? Are we going to need to farm some of that work out to maybe a Type 3 team or something? And just what that looks like. Duration, have a pretty good feel on most fires, what that looks like. A Martin fire, that thing was outpacing everything that we were even able to model. The AirTac couldn't even get around it before it would triple in size. So that's telling
Sitting in the room for about 3 days.
That's telling you some other things are moving quick, and your complexity is probably more than you're going to be able to deal with logistically and operationally and those kinds of things. You're looking at your planning levels nationally, geographically. Are you going to be able to get what you need for it? That's all weighing into how you're kind of planning out what that complexity is going to be and the different inputs that I know you're going to go through all that stuff in there. But we like doing that as a process with the administrators and the agency reps and just everyone being on the same page with what that's looking like. When we're dealing with counties and stuff, the county emergency manager can be key for us on both Pershing and Humboldt counties. Washington's a little tough. We got some folks to call up there, just making sure they're in the loop. We don't have K departments out here. They're all peers. They're going to have pretty limited involvement into like the duration of the incident once it's away from their immediate concerns, which was friendship. It's like that. Once it gets into the hills, they have pretty limited ability. So, but we want them to be enough at the table, and that really happens with the ICs out in the field and just unified command situations and making sure that we're getting what that box might look like. So we're able to incorporate that if there's anything specifically we need to document with this on what those specific actions we have. And if we can't access this, we're going to be on this road. Fire's either going to come to us or we got to, take out some indirect areas. And you document that. There's reasons for that. And usually it's, you want to fight fire in your terms in the safest way possible, but as aggressive as you can. So it's putting all those things together and put the right words in with just to say, this is what we're doing and why, and make sure that should be a transparent document for people on like that. So usually that's maybe a couple hours of, with everybody. And then it's back to the fire planner to finish it up, and then they'll get whoever the signing authorities are to say, hey, it's ready, final review, look at it, hit the button, and that's the initial decision. And then as the incident progresses, there may be some time to rehuddle and stuff, but usually it's just the fire planner just starting to, I won't say geek out at it, but, really trying to dial it in and make it a better, more dependable product over time. Cost, those are how you want to, like, what we're doing with cost and how we're estimating that, plus sort of stuff like that.
I think the biggest thing is we just going and looking at previous fires, using that, the estimator, but also
Line generator?
timeline generator.
Yes. Line generator.
Play with that. And then just a lot of our fires, we've got previous information already on it. Go talk to somebody who's on it. Look at the price they had last 4 years on it, up it by 20%.
One the other day was, we had so much aircraft heavy initially, that we jacked the price up, so that's why it changed. But still,
And that was a learning lesson as far as we could have 50,000, 100,000 acre fires with less aircraft than we had on that 2,500 acre fire the other day. So that ups the cost pretty quickly for them. The B lab, Q labs, seats, all that shit.
Yeah.
Or as a large fire, we might just have some seats floating on it.
right. One thing I did notice too about this camp season thing, you know, it seems like it used to be. And so time of season, if you do it early, it makes it high because it's assumed it's a forest fire, it's gonna burn till October. So it doesn't really correlate to what we have here.
It's just understanding what the risk assessment, right? I mean, you gotta understand the timing of the season, right? Are we in mid-July? Is this fire gonna last for 3 more months? Or are we in the end of October and this fire is gonna last for another 2 weeks? You know, that's really what that's getting at. Nothing more than that. So, yeah, there's a lot of things in there. The risk assessment is modeled after the PMS, the 236, I'm sorry, the PMS 236. So, the guide has a lot of information, and one of the things I want to highlight in the guide is that the old WFDSS had a really robust user guide that went with it, and a lot of the variables for this guide were actually defined in there. So, where if you're in WFDSS, you know, you should be able to click on like this question mark, right? And the little question mark will give you just a really brief summary of what that is. In the old guide, we could really, I mean, this was, you know, is it late? Is it middle? Is it early? And these are some of the, you know, criteria that you should be considering why. So the only reason I want to bring this up is because as you're working through this risk assessment process within your decision, a lot of the information isn't necessarily right there at your fingertips to help you guide through that process. But if you look at the guide, you can see that some of those criteria are a little bit better defined to maybe help you work through that. Not everything matched up exactly between old WFDSS and new WFDSS. There's a little bit of inconsistency, but all of you are smart enough, you should be able to work yourself through what those differences are. There's nothing significantly different in any of the language that we're doing, specifically in the risk assessment, right? The organizational needs is maybe a little different just because we reformatted that to kind of go along with the justifying the needs of each functional section within the ICS organization. But yeah, you can work through this. You can work through this risk complexity assessment, and whether you're doing it on the 236, I would guess that on your guys' incident organizers, right? As a type 3 IC, there's some form of incident organizer that's being completed as well. How do we bring that information in from the ICs? Is that through a phone call? Is that through, you know, did they scan that form and get that into you? Whatever that looks like, use the IC, use your resource advisors to help get that information as well, right? That's kind of a key cog in that wheel. And usually within those first 2 days, time is of the essence, but some well-coordinated conference calls either early in the morning or late in the evening that really helps coordinate some of that information flow and help bring that into your WFDSS decision.
And we've done that before too. As a
Right.
duty officer, you actually have the form. You got a pretty good idea of the complexity and you'll ask some specific questions just to take a little load off of the IC's, you know, doing it in real time and assessing that in real time. But the actual documentation that's making it to WFDSS, we've taken it right to the form before
Right.
with the input on a quick call on a couple of things, and then be able to move that whole form over and help inform the complexity on that, and then upload it too as,
Right.
hey, that's what was discussed collaboratively between the IC and the duty officer. We came up with this. This is how it translates into the complexity analysis and what it is.
Sure. This is also a good point to kind of talk about working collaboratively with multiple people in a decision. So one of the rules of thumb is you can have multiple editors working in a decision, but you should only have one editor per tab. right? So if I'm working in relative risk and we're working in this room, I'm gonna call out, hey, I'm working in the relative risk tab. Can nobody else go in there right now? I'm gonna do the edits that I need to do in there. And then once I'm done, I can get out of it. But if there's multiple people editing one tab at a time, it can cause conflicts in the system, because what you need to do is, first of all, if you're gonna make any edits into the decision at all, you need to come down here to the bottom and you need to uncheck ready for publication. This is for every section, okay? Every section has one of these ready for publication sliders. Once you unslide that button, what that does is that opens up the document where you can go in and you can make edits within the document. So here, I'm just gonna demonstrate, notice the blue save, or notice the save button. I make one little edit, I take a period out, now I can save it again. So when I hit the save button, this is what sends my edits back up into WFDS. And if there's multiple people doing that at the same time, you can create a conflict and you can actually crash a decision. So I think we're still kind of figuring out the ins and outs of that, but the rule of thumb that I'm telling everybody is if you're working with a large group of people, just have one group, one person working in each tab. So I would, you divvy it up. Somebody would be working on the strategy section, somebody would be working on firefighter safety section, somebody could be working on organization and complexity assessment, somebody could be working on all those sections. And we're going to do that here in just a few minutes, but there's one more thing that I really kind of want to highlight. So as we work through this complexity assessment, you'll also notice that each of these fields you can edit. This is called a rich text editor. This is how you can edit your WFDS decision and how you customize your decision, right? So WFDS doesn't automatically import any map. WFDS doesn't automatically import any weather. WFDS doesn't automatically import anything other than the information that you provide in these text fields. You, as an editor, I'm looking at Kyle as a fire planner, that's our job as fire planner is, we can go through there and we can add all of this auxiliary information, ancillary information to help make the decision better. Whether that's through maps, whether that's through weather reports, whether that's through anything that you can copy and paste, basically, you can put into a WFDS decision. And this is how you do it. So, you can do it, like I said, you can import things, you can just copy and paste things. If I want to do like a map capture, I'm just going to do a really simple one here. I'm not even going to put any effort into it other than having to move that bar out of my way. So if I wanted to just come in here, screen capture, back over into here. And you see it put that, probably don't want to put that right in the middle of all my text. So I'll bring it down here.
Hey, Dylan, it may be a stupid question, but circling back to something you said earlier, one question that came up about when we update a decision. So since that is rich text, couldn't we either highlight or italicize anything that we updated in the decision to draw attention to it?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. When you bring images into your decisions, like map images especially, this one isn't probably high resolution just because of how I captured it. But if I was to do a full screen capture, if you keep the original resolution, it's going to mess with the formatting in the PDF. So always drop it down by at least 50%. 75% is usually a pretty good number for maps, especially. What that does is it'll shrink that image down far enough to where it doesn't mess with anything in the PDF. There's still some buggy behavior in the PDF documents where if you put an image in there that's a large image, it'll push some stuff out of the PDF and it doesn't ever view in the PDF. It just doesn't, it's one of those weird table things that, stuff just disappears. So anyway, that is caused by putting an image that's too big in. So you can do that. You can resize that image. You can shrink it down. I would recommend 75% always. And if you can do it smaller, try to do it smaller. You can do alt text. You can do toggle captions. You can put captions in there. You can format your text to where it flows, along the size of the image. But this is basically, and this is every section, right? So we're doing this in the relative risk section right now. But in the decision rationale, it looks the exact same. In firefighter safety, it looks the exact same. And you can do that same editing in every single one of those sections. So a lot of the times why I bring that up, time of season, while we are early in our time of season, our ERCs are not early in time of season, right? So that's all supporting documentation that I know in your guys' decision, you have some climate graphs, right? You put ERC graphs, you put some of your fuel graphs in there too. So all of that information is great information in the relative risk. All of that information that we talked about on our Wednesday critical fuels calls, right? That's all the information that should be going into this type of section. When you get into hazards, right? You can be looking at natural resource values. You can be looking at fuel conditions, fire behavior. In this case, I went through earlier and I put in the FS Pro average flame length because as an operations person, that tells me, hey, I could probably put equipment on this part of the fire. I'm going to need crews on this part of the fire. This is giving me a general idea of what my resource types are going to be based off of what that predicted fire behavior is. Something that we haven't looked at real hardly yet is IFTDIS. We can look at IFTDIS modeling as well. I've got a screen capture in here. I already logged me out, so go back in here, log back in. But within that IFTDIS modeling, this is something that can be done, through the risk request, or this is something, you call me up and I can be doing this for you in the background too. But what this is once everything loads. So this is a minimum travel time fire behavior model that you can do in IFTDIS. And the difference between the FS Pro model, that is a probabilistic model that we did in WFDSS, and this is a deterministic model. This is actually telling you that the model is saying that this is going to be the perimeter based off of a static wind. That's what you got to understand. And this is in WFDSS and FlatMap, and in old WFDSS, we had near-term fire behavior modeling. Near-term fire behavior used dynamic winds that were brought in through a service. This only uses a static wind. So the model bases it off of one wind direction, one wind speed at one point in time, and applies that wind through the entire length of the model. But what that does is gives you deterministic idea of what that perimeter may look like based off of the wind that you forecast and give it. And you can also zoom in here and you can look at major travel paths. And what the major travel paths do, a couple things you can do here. You can look at thread transparency. And if I change the base map over again to an imagery layer, and as I zoom in here, and I know there's a lot of them right now, right? But if I have an idea of this is the path of this fire getting out and burning these acres, as an operations, what can I do? What can I do along these areas, either with retardant equipment, crews, whatever, to help block off some of those points where the model thinks that fire, that's going to be the minimum travel time or the minimum travel path of that fire. So again, there's a lot of assumptions that go into these models. Even this model is based off of zero suppression action being taken on a fire. So everything that this model produces is based off of zero suppression. But again, a good analyst can account for that by putting barriers along your fire, where you're going to be confident, where you're confident that you're going to hold your fire and it's not going to jump or something like that. And then we can start calibrating that model a little bit better based off of fuel conditions, weather conditions, and so forth. But
that's reading terrain too.
No, well, this is bringing in terrain into the model. Yeah. So yeah, it is. That's part of the spread. It's still based on, all of our fire behavior models are based on Rothermel spread equation. Really, the only thing that changes in the models is at what point does wind overcome slope. That's the only difference in most of our fire models is when is that tipping point where slope overcomes wind or wind overcomes slope. And that's really what they're trying to model. But this is a good, again, this is a good idea. This gives you a good idea of which direction your fire is going to go. Gives you a good idea of what the fuel conditions are in those paths, and it gives you a good idea of what kind of time frames you have. So again, take it for what it's worth, but this is all good evidence that can be included in your WFDSS decision. The reason I wanted to bring that up is because potential fire growth, that would probably be a good section for your MTT, where in this section, fire behavior, just using those basic fire behavior outputs from your FS Pro model probably gives you what you need there, right? So again, it's just minimal information, but you can use that information. The right people can use that information to help formulate their plans, what they're looking at, what they're going to do. So just because you don't understand it doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be important for somebody else. All that information can be put into here. The other thing that WFDSS does now is it works in these metrics that we've been talking to the last couple of years as far as RMA, suppression difficulty index. You can look at potential control locations, and I don't really like the potential control locations bar graph just because, or pie graph. Even the SDI. I think SDI is an important metric when you're looking at it spatially on a map, but looking at it on a pie graph doesn't really tell me that much, So keep that in mind. But again, this is information that can be used by safety officers to help, rationalize some of the decisions that they're having to make and so forth. And you can add that into this section as well. So within this section, the relative risk, it's really important that you have all this information. There's a lot of information for values, natural resource values, proximity and threats to those values. So again, this is where we go back to the FS Pro model. We can look at time frames. So, we have 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 days. That's what the model's telling us anyway. We know that in real life, that's probably a 1 day fire. Here we can look at socioeconomic concerns, obviously a lot of mining, Interstate 80. So, at first glance, somebody would look out there and say, oh, that's Pumpernickel Valley. There's not a lot of natural resource concerns, where there might not be a lot of natural resource concerns, but socioeconomic concerns between gold mines, Interstate 80,
Utility.
railroad, all of that information. Yeah, all those facilities, right? That all plays into the relative risk. So as you go through there and rate these, this is a discussion. Each of the ratings for each of these elements, that's going to be dependent. I would ask for direction from, your FMO or from your agency administrator or from your bureau rep, how you want that done. As a fire planner, I can certainly go through there and put my interpretation in there and give you guys a starting jump off point, but that's something that's all going to need to kind of be decided, because if you can build most of this, and in my experience as a fire planner, I'm most efficient if you give me like 3 or 4 hours to do your initial decision, then bring in a couple SMEs or whatever that we need to kind of refine it, and then bring in your agency administrators that we can look through. And if that doesn't work for you, that's fine. But there's different ways that decisions can be accomplished. And by knowing what those planning areas are and knowing kind of what these criteria are, that's kind of the key for a firefighter to start building this decision and making it easier for you. WFDSS will tally all of your ratings. And then down here at the relative risk rating, it will default the selection to whichever one is the highest, but you have the ability to override that and justify that in here, however you want to justify that. So just because WFDSS will default to whatever your ratings tell it to default to, you can always override that rating and justify that. I would recommend putting some sort of justification in there. There's no requirement because you have to or what that, but it is a good idea to justify why you're going against what the recommended rating is.
Same thing when you go to assign your level of complexity and why
Yes.
you may keep it at a type 3 versus a complex.
Exactly. Whenever you're doing anything in these sections, always make sure that when you're done, you hit the save button. Let the blue spinny wheel of death spin. that spins, you should be able to slide the ready for publication slider over. And that'll trigger the blue wheel again. Just be patient with it. And that'll save. So the next important strategy, or the next important section is the strategy tab. And the strategy tab is important because this is where we can either include, so in this case, we already have a strategic assessment. So we're going to go ahead and view that. That by unchecking ready for publication. Clicking on that. And this is just kind of a broad-based strategic assessment narrative that you can plug into a WFDSS decision. It is specific to sage-grouse habitat. So, you know, we do have a few units that don't have any sage-grouse habitat. Actually, we don't have those units anymore. Even Southern Nevada now has sage-grouse habitat. So every district in Nevada has greater sage-grouse habitat. This is a good canned statement that you could use for a strategic assessment for just a basic fire, right? Some of the items that I want to highlight, you know, that you would want to include, what type of strategy, you know, and I think we've hit this, you know, numerous times, that even if you have the ability to manage a fire for multiple objectives, the Secretary's direction this year is everything is full suppression all the time. So in this strategic assessment narrative, you would want to highlight that we are going full suppression on a fire because this is what's going to be read. And then the leader's intent as far as drawing the box. And this is, I leave this up to discussion, right? Because not everybody likes to draw the box. As a fire planner, I would tell you to draw the box. And what the box you're defining here is not the planning area, right? The planning area has already been defined. The planning area is a larger extent. The box that you're defining here is the containment box that you're giving to the IC saying, we would like you to, within your actions, keep fire east up, north up, west up, south. Whatever tools, whatever resource, you know, if there's something that's restricted, let's have a discussion, but you have whatever tools are at your disposal, keep fire east up, west up, north up, south up. That, and then give them leader's intent. Why do you want it south of I-80 to prevent, you know, closing I-80 and public safety hazards? Why do you want it, you know, why do you want to keep it west of Pumpernickel Valley? What's east of Pumpernickel Valley that should protect it? You know, there's obviously resource values out there. That's why you put the leader's intent in there. So we can look at your guys's, you know, I think that was a good point of having the courts fire is I can talk, you know, and we can look through training, but here you guys actually went through and your strategic course of action right there that you used for courts. So I'll give that a sec. You guys can read that. Yeah, use indirect tactics including breakdown operations.
It provides some pretty clear direction with it. It's our own ICs that kind of know that, but say we have lots of fires going on and we had to bring in a type 3 IC and they're like, oh, what are my boundaries here? What can or can't I do? It's pretty clear that that's supported and why.
On the planners fought to get that into our 2015, and I'll give you an example. In Elko, if we're fighting fire up in the northeast corner of Elko County and it burns into Utah, as soon as it burns into Utah, their sage-grouse plan says that they cannot do burnouts. They cannot go indirect. Where our greater sage-grouse says indirect. So it's important, right? And that's why the Secretary's memo this year, where it confuses strategies and tactics, is very upsetting to me as a fire planner because you can utilize indirect strategies and still reach a full containment strategy in a fire. And by sorry, make a negative connotation, but by saying indirect tactics are a negative thing, we're setting people up for failure going into a bad fire season. So yeah, I think that's good. I think that's really good language in the course of action that you guys used for courts. What's that?
I thought there was more to that where it said keep fire
Or is that
Delegation expanded or?
There is some buggy behavior with the PDFs, right? And like I said, it's, if you put images in there, a lot of times it's pushing them down somewhere. So if it did cut some of that out, let me know and I can report that out and they can take a look at it and see.
That's the PDF.
If you log back into WFDSS, you may actually be able to see it in WFDSS. And that's again, the other important thing of having access, you know, WFDSS produces a PDF. That PDF is not always 100% of what's actually in WFDSS. We're seeing that. So again, as an IC3, if you actually want to know what is in WFDSS, you want to log into WFDSS and see it in the source, you have to have access to WFDSS. So here's a few other things. I mean, we'll get into, I just want to look at the cooperators, strategic comparison. The strategic comparison section, that's really, you know, if we did have the ability to do anything other than full suppression, what would be the trade-offs, right? I mean, if we were going to consider managing this for a monitor or a point zone protection strategy, what would be the trade-offs versus just going full suppression, putting the fire out? So the fact that our secretarial order, basically, our secretarial memo directs us to go nothing but full suppression, you don't have a lot of strategic comparison you need to do. If you want to highlight some stuff in there, you certainly can. But the fact that we've got secretarial direction that says everything's getting put out full suppression, smallest possible size, that's really all the things you need to consider in there. In the risk assessment, you can see that everything is color coded in the PDF as well. So whether it's low, moderate, or high, green, yellow, or green, amber, and red. See here, but yeah, sagebrush live fuel moisture readings, definitely good information to include in there as well. Weather forecast, weather matrix. Oh, I'm even using the BIM sheet. Man, I like it. I like it. Tons of good information here. So that's a course decision. So I'm back in training now. Okay. Back in, and I want to look at, because there's a couple of different ways that you can incorporate strategic course of actions into your decision. One is the strategic assessment, but you can also have strategic courses of actions, right? And within that strategic course of action, myself, slide over, ready for publication.
strategic assessment. Okay, you're in the
Strategic course of action.
okay, so the assessment is where I've got the objectives.
Is it right? This fire?
No, of course.
Okay, yeah, we're back in the training.
Yeah, no, I know. I was just
Okay. Yeah,
trying
we're
to figure out where that.
okay. Gotcha. So yeah, strategic assessment, that is one portion with the strategic assessment. There's some things, we've already read it for the courts, so I'm not going to go through and actually do it. More often than not, you're going to use your planning area, right? You're going to use your current planning area. And then in here, you can name it whatever you want. And you can apply whatever language you want to that as well. And then in this is where you can tell it to include in the decision. If you check this box right here, it will include it in the decision. If you highlight it in the decision, it puts it right behind the decision rationale. Otherwise, if you don't highlight in the decision, it buries it back in its normal section. But if you highlight in the decision, it pushes it up right behind the decision rationale. And then if you wanted to mark it off as a critical value at risk, you could draw that on the map and actually signify that that's a critical value at risk as well. So that's the section that I'm talking about, where if we can identify what those critical values at risk are and put those into your decision. The important thing is that a lot of times agency administrators look at that 120 list item in that spatial inventory, and we try to include all those things, right? We can't include every value at risk. You have to prioritize what those values at risk are. And from an operations side, especially to an incoming team, if you're giving an incoming ops chief 25 different values to protect without prioritizing them, what's actually getting done.
Yeah, well, we're gonna come back and say, we can actually do this many. So what are your top five?
Exactly.
You know, we're not getting the resources we want right now. It's PL5. It's like, what are your top priorities? And we're gonna make our plans to be successful in those areas and maybe we can mitigate the other ones.
Exactly. The point is in this section, I narrow down what that list is. You know, what are your top five? I wouldn't go more than 10. I mean, if you can keep it less than 10, great. But as a general rule of thumb, if you give more than 10 values, you know, and priorities to be protected, that's not going to get done. You only have a certain number of resources. You only have a certain amount of time frame to look at. So give them your top 5, your top 10 priorities. A lot of times you can start lumping those values together because you'll start finding that by doing one action, you're protecting multiple values. So you can start consolidating that list down and merging them in until you can get like a manageable list.
It gets a little more complicated too when there's multiple agencies involved in that perimeter because everyone's got their own number one priority. Got a fire that's on the park and the BLM. Well, this is reservation stuff up here where, you know what I mean? That you could have some differing things and it's really up to all those administrators or reps to get together and put their heads together and say, we've got to come up with a consolidated, you know, top 10 that kind of meets all of our top priorities, but it may not meet every single protection objective we would like to see out there. And maybe it does, but it gets more complicated the more players you have. We're trying to come up with that critical values and risk inventory for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I would definitely recommend, like I said, the more information we can put into this, and if you can list all those critical values of risk and actually not just list them, but spatially define them, where are they at on the map and not just, you know, not just by 100,000 acre polygon. I mean, if you know what the extent of that value is, map it, put it in the Spatial Fire Planning Service, and then we can start including it in WFDSS decisions, right? And that's what Spatial Fire Planning Service is all about, is being able to spatially represent what those values are. So I'm going to say, okay, here. Go into strategic course of action. We've talked that. Now, this is one of the things you got to pay attention to, right? Because this cost can get buried and hidden. Yeah, it hides. Yes, it definitely hides. So you want to make sure that you don't skip over cost. Again, you need to uncheck it, check ready for publication. In this case, we're estimating the fire at $2 million, basing that off of historic costs. If you used any of these other methods, you can. Kyle brought it up earlier on the RMA dashboard is the timeline generator. That is probably the coolest tool that I've ever used for estimating cost of an incident. You can go back into any incident that was built into the Irwin system, anything from 2025, you can probably look at right now, and it puts it into a bar graph, and you can see how your containment was affected by resources, and you can see the cost of that incident over the life of the incident too, all visually on a graph. So it makes it really cool. If you have fires, you know, if you have historical fires that you knew that this was the cost, you can use that as well. But really, this is the WAG, and this is what I put into the guide as well. You know, for any type 3 incident in Nevada, $1.5 million. I mean, by the time you consider aircraft cost, $1.5 million for a type 3 incident in Nevada. If you're going to order a type 3 team for that fire, $3 million is probably more appropriate for that initial WFDSS decision, and $10 million for a PIMP. So just keep that in mind. We used to have the $5 million, $10 million cost threshold notifications. We don't have those notifications anymore. So on the business side, I'm not quite sure how they're going to handle that. That's up to the Christina Phillips of the world. I know they're working on it, but in WFDSS doesn't care whether your fire is a $5 million, a $10 million fire. All it cares about is that your cost doesn't exceed this estimated final fire cost. So that tells me, I mean, they're going to be relying on WFDSS a lot more to track those initial costs, because on the business side, we all know that it takes months for costs to accrue, to come in through bills, through cooperator billing and all that. So you're not getting an accurate fire cost until 6-8 months down the road in most cases. So this is a way, you know, I try not to offend the finance people. Sometimes there's finance people sitting through this section. This section is just a whack. I mean, you can put as much analysis into it as you want. When you get a team that comes in, this is where you can have the finance section chief for that team provide you daily cost reports that you can then include in, you can put those pie graphs into your decision or just the daily summaries, whatever they happen to be. But yeah, this is, this section is just an initial wag anyway. And what I've always told people is don't limit yourself. I've seen lifted decisions with like $700,000 limits. So for that, just put $1.5 million in there, and then you don't have to worry about, whoa, if we order one more air tanker, we're going to exceed my lifted cost. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
On the other hand, like you said earlier, the assessment though, we can just change it then.
Yep.
We got to republish it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, it used to be you'd have to republish the whole decision, but now you just change that number, hit the button again, and everything's good to go. So that's all you have to do if you exceed that initial cost. Firefighter safety is a new section. And again, we've kind of talked about the graphs that this puts in there. More maps, I think, would be better in here. The weather and smoke section is, it works, that's what I said right there. So whenever you see a note like this, that means that it's just built for future development. They've got it in there, hopefully in the future, I don't know how many of you guys are utilizing the weather services fire weather grid, right? They got that new product where you click on a map and it produces a fire weather matrix, just like you would see from an iBet, at a fire. That is much more valuable than a textual based fire weather forecast to me. And if you see that in the WFDSS decision with a 5-day outlook that shows green, yellow, red for your winds and relative humidities, that's a hell of a lot more value than a text based fire weather forecast. So be thinking about what is important in the WFDSS decision. That was always a huge hang up of mine is, they put the daily fire weather forecast in the WFDSS decision, and 3 or 4 days later, somebody's reading it, and that's already a 5-day-old forecast. So there's better products, there's better links that we can put in there. What can we put in there to make those decisions better?
One thing real quick, Dylan.
Yeah.
That firefighter safety does not pull up the decision.
Oh, it doesn't? It doesn't publish in the decision? Yeah, that's good to know. So yeah, don't put a lot of effort into firefighter safety if it doesn't even publish in the decision.
But make it your first priority.
Right. It's in there. I mean, so it just doesn't publish in the PDF. So yeah. The organization complexity, again, is modeled off the PMS 236. You can go through there. The guide itself. Over a lot of information without. So yeah, all that information from all these sections. This is the strategy section. Incident objectives, basically every good incident objective from every fire in northern Nevada over the last 10 years is included in this guide in one form or another. Incident requirements, that's another thing that goes into that strategic course of action. You can just paste them in there as a list if you want, but incident requirements and incident objectives, 2 different things. Remember, incident objectives, more broad-based, leaders intent, keep fire east of, north of, west of, south of. Incident requirements are things that the IC will do. So you will utilize a local liaison. You will keep my public information officer included in your daily 1300, those type of things. Those are incident requirements. So make sure, that any of those can be included in there. You can put mop-up standards, turnback standards, those are all appropriate things to put into a WFDSS decision. These are some examples of mop-up standards and turnback standards that we put in WFDSS decisions in the past just to help communicate to a team. The mop-up standards, we developed those in 2007. We had numerous type 1 teams trying to back out of fires earlier saying, look, these are what we expect before we even start talking about transition. So this is, kind of things that you can put in there. The course of action statement should be, they shouldn't conflict. You can have multiple courses of action, but you need to make sure that they don't conflict with each other. In old WFDSS, there was one course of action, right? And that was the course of action that we took for the fire. You can have multiple course of action statements within your WFDSS decisions. So just make sure that they don't conflict with each other. Again, WSAs, that would be a good section to where, if a fire gets established in a WSA, what does that decision framework look like for authorizing use of dozers, use of off-road, use of retard, whatever intrusions we're looking for. So that's a good point. You can put that in your WFDSS decision too, because that tells the IC that if your fire crosses into this area, this is the process that we have to go through to do whatever it is we want to do. And if we don't have a process, right?
I had a question though. So what if you're putting that information in their leader's intent document that goes with their delegation? Do you want to restate that in the WFDSS, or do you want to say per, wilderness actions per leader's intent issued on this date or something?
Right.
Can you just do that, or is it better to restate it?
I would restate it, and I'm thinking of the scenario of what if you get an IC4 coming over from Burns Junction? How do they know what your leader's intent was if it's not in the WFDSS? Right, I mean, are you gonna give them a leader's intent before they go out on a fire?
I was thinking about the teams. And
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Or,
So, but when you're downgrading, I mean, wouldn't that be the team transitioning that information to that coming tech board? I see what you're saying. I would just put it in there, and it would be easy enough to cut and paste it.
Yep.
Out, so.
Yeah, I would just make it a standard JPEG. I mean, scan it right now and just every fire you do, put that JPEG in that decision or whatever, or have that group of text, that you just copy and paste. That'd be a good way to do it for sure. Some other things, strategic course of action, these are all in the guide, other than full suppression. There is some language that I have in there for other than full suppression course of actions. Again, a lot of that comes from point zone protection, and I'm still, I'm waiting to see. We need direction. We need clarification of these new suppression strategies, right? So that is supposed to be in WFDSS. Here in the next couple of weeks, our new suppression strategies are supposed to be in WFDSS. And it's supposed to be direction that if the fires occur on DOI, Wildland Fire Service jurisdiction, we can only choose those two suppression strategies. The full suppression strategy, the point zone protection, the monitor, and the other than full suppression won't even be available for us to select. So, and the only thing that was brought up during a WFDSS conference call by the WFDSS developers. I asked San Amato and West Hall how they plan on doing that. That was what they said. So I haven't heard that direction coming through the chain in any stretch, or there hasn't been any information flowing down through the chain of command of what those suppression terminology tactics look like in WFDSS. But in order for us to adopt those, 209 has to be adjusted, WFDSS has to be adjusted. And that was the point everybody was trying to make, is why do this now? Why not wait till the end of the season? But other people had other ideas. So
it's all full suppression.
It's all full suppression. So there's language in there, cost, obviously aircraft use is always a driver of our cost, especially for our initial attack fires the first couple of days. Once the team comes in, again, that's where you can use the finance chief. There is an email notification guide in the template, but we don't need to do that anymore. What I wanted to get to was this organization assessment tab. So again, each of the fields in the organization assessment, which we're in right now, are here. And then in the functional concerns as well, where you get down. This is the new section. And in WFDSS, when we fill out this section right here, when we get down to recommended organization, check ready for publication, right? So right now, based off of the criteria that we selected in that assessment, WFDSS is saying that it's a moderate complexity and that the majority could be handled type 3. But again, we have the ability to override that. So as a WFDSS editor, you can select any one of these that you want to. But if you select the CIMP, hit save, and then ready for publication. Then opens up the PMS 236 Part D section. And then this is what needs to be completed if you're ordering a multi-sense advantage. So there's been a lot of back and forth in the authorities table. It states that the WFDS decision has to be published before ordering a complex incident management team. That is implying that somewhere along the way, somebody's going to be reviewing WFDS and looking to make sure a WFDS decision was published. If you push the button and order a complex incident management team, these are the same, this is the same information that the NMAC form requires to justify ordering a team when you're in PL 4 or 5, right? So if you complete this information in WFDS, the thought is that NMAC would be able to review that information in WFDS and approve or deny the request based off of the multiple fires that they're looking at. But that's where this information is coming from. Now, I'm not saying that NMAC is still not going to require an additional form. In the past, NMAC has been able to do this, but NMAC still requires you to put it onto a form and then batch it to NMAC or whatever NMAC.
So is there a fail-safe in that if you select CIMT that it won't let you get to the end without doing that?
Right, if you select CIMT, you have to do this section. But selecting CIMT is the only thing that opens up this section too. So I just wanted to demonstrate that. And that is important again with our agency administrators, because if we are ordering those teams, and you guys ordered the CIMT? So isn't there a process we're supposed to get on stuff?
No, that was the CIM.
Right.
So can we publish something? And it obviously triggers a team order a team and then go back.
No, that doesn't trigger anything.
No, I'm saying if we're due the decision, we're at the level of 3, and then in that decision, we put our trigger points for a team order. And it hits those trigger points. We're like, well, we gotta order a team now. Do we go back in and then reevaluate, re-sign it with the Part D?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you would have.
Yes, no, I'm saying that's
If you don't do that, you're behind the curve.
But I'm saying if it, at the same time, the auditor says, hey, we gotta order the team. He orders them, and it's like, well, have you done your Part D yet? We're like, well,
Right.
we're in the process of it.
With that decision order, you do the Part D in here, publish the decision, and then when the order is actually placed for the team in IROC, and it goes from your local center to the GAC is then the GAC team coordinator is then gonna call Nick, and they're gonna say, this is the information that we have. Yes. So this doesn't trigger anything.
No, I know that.
He's saying don't order the team until you've done that.
Right.
Yeah,
So Donovan does say, I think we need to order a team, let's get this part done real quick, so
Yeah.
I can get it going.
exactly. That's what I was trying to see if there's like, you can just order a team before you're, at the same time.
And the reason I say that is because implied, is because the only thing that it implies that is in the authorities table, right? There's no policy that says that you have to have a WFDS decision published before you order a team.
Right.
In the authorities table, they're saying that when you order a team based off the published decision. So that's just, you know, it's not direction right now, but we're interpreting it as direction based off of, that's the best thing we got going right now. So the key is if you're gonna order a team, make sure your WFDS decision has Part D completed, right? If you don't have this completed in your decision, then you order the team. If there's other levels of approval for that team, basically the coordinating group or the NMAC group, then that's where they're gonna fall back to your WFDS decision and say, is it included in their WFDS decision? And they're gonna look at your WFDS decision, they're gonna ask somebody like me to go into the WFDS decision, do you see it, is it in there? And we say, yeah, it's in there, it's good, go ahead and order the team, they're gonna order the team. I mean, that's all it is, check and balance process, make sure that that information gets included. And whatever NMAX process looks like this year, I haven't. But anyway, that only gets triggered when you select CIMT in Part E, basically. So I did want to show that. So I'm going to slide that back over. And at this point, we are at the decision approval process. And this is important because most editors will not have access to this section at all. You're going to be able to see the information that's in there, but unless you're listed as an approver, you're not going to be able to slide this over and do any editing whatsoever. That was intentionally set up. Okay? In old WFDS, agency administrators kind of got a free pass because it was so new. They got used to whether it be editors, fire planners, us actually going into the decision and typing everything in there for them. So when they created next generation WFDS, they made it to where the approver is the only one that can edit information in that decision rationale field. So you have to be included as an approver to be able to edit this information. So in this decision, myself, Brad, Donovan, and John should be the only ones in the room that can do any editing to this right now. And that's gonna help you out in you know, as a fire planner, because that's gonna force them to go into the decision and actually type their rationale into the decision. I'm not saying that they can't direct you to type up something and email it to them, or they can then copy and paste into the decision. But they are the ones that actually have to go into the decision, paste their language into the decision, push the buttons and approve everything. So in this case here, you know, again, this is the canned language for the decision rationale based on the guide. I've kind of got it delineated into, are you going to put a type 3 IMT on the fire, or are you going to order a complex incident management team? So when I'm saying or in here, your decision rationale is either going to be this paragraph or it's going to be this paragraph. It's not going to be both. Some of the other information that you have in the decision rationale are the jurisdictional agencies that we talked about, right? You can have language in there with the cost estimates. All that information can be included in the decision rationale. If you have multiple approvers in the decision rationale, every approver is going to have to approve it before you can publish the decision. So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because that's kind of the next step, but I do want to highlight that we can be working on that. And now we're kind of down the home stretch, right? So we're in the decision approval tab. One of the coolest tools is this right here, right? So it's telling us that we still need strategic assessment, strategic course of action, estimated final incident cost, organization complexity, and agency administrator rationale. So online needs to mute themselves. Got a hot mic.
Before you move on, again, circling back.
Yes.
Is that legacy language for agency administrator?
Yes. Yes, that is legacy language. So I will go back in here, but what I'd like to do is just to give me kind of a break, stop talking for a minute, get you guys back in with this. So this is very common, right? We're going to have, I mean, maybe this is a little larger group than we normally have, but we'd have a pretty large group doing a projector party, working on a WFDSS decision. Okay, we need to get through those items right there, the strategic assessment, strategic course of action, estimated final incident cost, organization complexity, and agency administrator rationale in the next 20 minutes. Let's say I want to come back at 11:30 and have the decision ready to approve. So within this group, with Kyle working as the lead, as the point of contact, have everyone go back into those sections and get the decision ready for us to approve in 20 minutes. Can you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So right now I have my approvers as Chad, John, Bradley, and Donovan in there. I have written a strategic assessment, course of action, final cost, complexity, rationale. A lot of these check boxes are also, they're nice because you can actually click on the letter, the word there, and it'll take you straight to that box, take you straight to that part that needs to get looked at.
So this is an easy one, right? We can do this one right now if you guys want to key in on what needs to be done.
I'm not gonna say it.
So in this section right here, what needs to be done? What are we, you guys are looking at the screen right now. What needs to be done in order for that checkbox to populate for the organization and complexity? Knowing that we've already gone through and populated all. Publish. That's all it is. Yep, that's all it is right there. So if we, and I'm just doing this because I want to just demonstrate this. There's a missing field in there somewhere. I'm going to go back to you. Go through each of these sections. Find out what section, what needs to be done, and go back. The easiest thing to do is I can either keep this up, I'll just keep this up on the checklist here, and every now and then I'll tab over. But yeah, we need one group to go into each of those sections and figure out what is wrong. Either it's the ready for publication button or there's missing information. If you slide over the ready for publication button, and it tells you there's missing information, go through that section, find the missing information. It's usually a checkbox, it's usually a field, or it could be as simple as somebody needing to push the save button too. A lot of times that's all it is. But this is a good practice, right? So go ahead and do that for the next 20 minutes and we'll reconvene at 11:30. And at which point we should have the decision ready for each of the listed approvers to approve.
Did you go in assessment? Chad, why don't you go into course of action?
Okay.
John, do you want to go into cost? Sure. Don, do you want to go into complexity?
Okay.
So you slow down. Sit down one and I just want to get some chat. So action. It's good, and I'm gonna order. It's there. So go over to, so leave that one. I'll leave something. You go into that. Check it. So you're done.
Nothing in it, so.
If you scroll down,
Oh, the bottom of this.
We need to
figure.
There is one.
That you don't. So preview down.
Looks like the boss should have one already. So what else though? It's recommending mine. But see, I need to just check here, instead of the three.
You're done. So you go back to this.
So check through and say something.
Even better times the next step.
Yes.
So delete that out there.
Oh, yeah,
So are those showing up can in them? I got a good look like it is. Such.
One day
That's a Kyle question. You just set this up like that.
That's it. Save it, sorry. Also, they go back.
He's a guy, folks go far.
We would just delete this out. Do we want to delete this out?
You show me up, cause like it's got this. It's only the first action. If you click on it, it's like down.
There's a save it.
I feel it.
Since you're in most of our area, you could be the first signature. Now it's the rationale that you would put in there, I cannot. Since knowing I have stuff set up and just email it to you.
So we chose not to do an IMT, so we would say local type 3 organization.
spill.
Yeah. Ready for publication.
Can it, so say like this incident is majority Beal, Winnemucca. He puts in his rationale, sends it to Chad. Chad goes in there and edits it. Donovan does not want to hit that publication slider yet, correct? Like he could send it, say he could send a team message to say, hey Chad, I got the rationale and you go in and make your edit. Send it to John, send it to,
The easier way would be just everybody is on the same page, right? Yeah. I mean, you don't necessarily get everybody to type in. As long as Donovan and Chad are on the same page and they're on the same page with the bureau rep, I mean, they can, all the approvers can collaborate on what that looks like. Type that in, and then if one of the approvers has additional information that maybe they need to add specific to their agency, Forest Service is a good example, right? In this scenario, let's say Forest Service was involved because Forest Service has the 10 questions, right? You guys still have to include the 10 questions in your decision?
Not sure.
Okay, so it used to be Forest Service policy that you had a series of 10 questions.
I don't think that's gone away.
They either had to be answered directly in the decision rationale or the interpretation was throughout the decision. So they each became a list of questions. On any Forest Service decision, we would always, they would have a Forest Service decision rationale with their 10 questions that we would include those in. So say it depends on locally what you